Welcome, everybody. Tonight, I'd like to call this meeting to order, the Gainesville Regional Authority Board meeting. It is 5:30. Can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Chair, Member Carroll.
Here.
Member Lawson.
Here.
Vice Chair Coates.
Here.
Chair Carter.
Here. Okay, we're going to have the invocation. I'll handle it tonight unless we have somebody who would like to do it out there tonight. I didn't think so. Let us pray. Father, thank you so much for the wisdom you give us in situations like this. Father, thank you for the citizens of Gainesville and Alachua County. And Father, we ask patience as we get through this meeting and through the next year or two as we get this ship going in a little bit different direction. Father, thank you for the members up here. Please lead us and guide us in your heavenly name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, at this time, we'll have public comment not pertaining to the agenda, please. And we are doing a 3-minute limit with a 30-minute total time frame.
May I give you some background?
Yeah, just come on. Normally, we'd have to give it to the clerk, but
Thank you.
I'll take Carter.
They're all identical, by the way.
Oh, no problem.
Oh, look at that. Got our names on it.
Mr. Chair, Jim Conish, I think it's about time, since you swore to uphold the charter, that we take a look at a few provisions in the charter. I don't read it the way the city attorney does, obviously. So if you go behind tab 1, you'll see the entire charter, an outline of it. The city attorney claims because he's city attorney, he's the authority attorney, but he's wrong. He is the city commission attorney, and he also represents the charter officers that likewise answer to the city commission. He does not represent the airport authority. He does not represent the GRU authority as a matter of the charter. He's just out of his lane. There is a controversy that's led to a request for Mr. Cunningham and the mayor to resign due to violation of 2.10 interference with charter officers, which is under investigation, sir, by the state of Florida. You went up there with them. You're aware of this matter. You demonstrate a lack of understanding about the charter when you tell your colleagues this binds you also. It doesn't. The authority members are not under any such constraint because they're an authority, not a commission, not a board, sir. So you're wrong about that, and you don't have effective legal counsel, and you're in a legal morass, sir. The position, the first sentence, and I sat in a room with Scott Walker, David Wagner, and Patrice Boyce, and I pointed out the first sentence eliminates Mr. Cunningham's former position as of July 1st, and all powers thereunder and all ordinances based on that. He's stripped down to HR only. He's been committing ultra-virus acts around the clock since October 4th, sir. He does not have authority to lower the fuel adjustment charge, sir, but he did it. And he's probably done hundreds of things that he's not authorized to do. 701, the authority shall be free from the direction and control of the Gainesville City Commission. That, moreover, knocks Mr. Nee out of the box on that basis. In the definitions, it's very important to distinguish between the authority, the city, and the city commission. Those are three different entities, and I must say, those words are not used precisely in here, and Nee bases all his legal theories on this. But the legislation is presumed to be constitutional, sir, and Judge Dempsey doesn't give any indication that it's not, although she didn't reach that issue. I want to point out that 7.031E has very specific guidance on this authority dealing with the refinancing.
I apologize, I'm just getting signal that your time's up. I was looking for a light or something over there. I thought we had.
Okay, but
apologize.
I'm just leading into, the agenda now. But there is a very specific charter provision governing the refinancing you're looking at.
Okay,
And the good news is, 7.106, you're not personally liable for any debts or liabilities the authority decides to assume. That's good news since you're not being paid. I doubt if you would want 1.8 billion on your spreadsheet.
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mr. Chair, we're going
Yes.
to have the IT employee just lift up the visual box so you can see it.
Aha. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you. I was looking for it. Next speaker, please. Okay, seeing none. Adoption agenda, we need a motion?
I move to accept the agenda.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would anybody like to speak to the motion on the floor? Seeing none again. All in favor? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion for approval of the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would anybody like to discuss the minutes? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye. They have it. Okay, next item. Madam Clerk, you want to start calling them off?
Mr. Chair, yes. The next item is the CEO or general manager remarks.
So, Mr. Chair, I just have a few things. We have a pretty full agenda, so I'm just going to point out something Mr. Kanish actually referenced. So, last month in November, we were able to lower the fuel adjustment by 5 mils. Last week, at December 1st, we were able to lower it another 5 mils. And I just want to mention that because that is a direct impact for our customers in the lowering of their bills. Fuel is a pass-through cost. What is collected from the customer, or what is the expenses from the fuel is then collected from the customers. And so we've been able to recover the fuel levelization fund to a point where we're able to lower that back down. And so going into the holiday season, on a 1,000 kilowatt hour bill, it's about $10 less per month with those two adjustments. The other thing I want to just bring to the attention of the board is just a reminder, what we established during the workshop is a pretty aggressive schedule over the next couple of weeks and months. We have 2 meetings a month. We have a meeting on the 14th. We originally were going for the 13th. We moved it to the 14th of December, then January 3rd, and then January 17th, and then February 7th. So we're on a pretty aggressive schedule, and just kind of bringing that up for you all. We'll be hitting a lot of topics, starting to really get into the meat of the budget over the next couple of weeks and months. So that is really what I wanted to kind of bring to the board, and the rest are in the business items that we have below.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chair, the first item is 2023-1148 Liquidity Facility Options, May 2024.
So, Mr. Chair, we've had a couple of discussions on the liquidity facilities already. Mark Benton, he is our accounting and finance director. He'll be giving a presentation today regarding those and actions to be taken tonight for us to move forward with those facilities. And then we also have our bond counsel here, if there are any questions, Mike Weiner from Holland and Knight. So,
Okay, great. Mark, before you speak real quick, you might notice that we're going to ask staff to sit up here with us. And the reason being is so you can actually maybe see them as they speak, so you're not looking at their backsides. So we're trying to do it for the respect of the audience and any cameras that are on. So if you see us changing up, we're trying to learn as we go. Go ahead, Mark.
As we talked about the last time I was here on your November 1st meeting, GRU has a pretty active variable rate debt program. We have 4 series of variable rate demand bonds that total about $172 million in outstanding principal. These bonds, their prices reset daily, and the holders of those bonds can tender them for payment at any time. When they do that, GRU remarkets that bond, and they use the proceeds from that remarketing to actually pay that prior bondholder. The purpose of the liquidity facility is that in the event that remarketing fails, the provider of the facility steps in and makes that payment to the underlying bondholder. If the facility was not in place, GRU would have to come up immediately with that principal payment, and that can be a fairly significant hit depending on the size of the bonds being tendered. The reason that we're here tonight is that GRU has three series of bonds they're in the matrix here, 2005C, the 2006A, and the 2012B, that all have liquidity facilities that are expiring on May 17th of 2024. This is the amortization schedule for the bonds that those liquidity facilities support. As you can see, in total, the principal is about $105 million on these three. The vast majority of that principal is in Series 2012B, which also has the longest maturity, final maturity of 2042. This structure is important when we talk about comparing the cost of the alternative scenarios for replacing or renewing those facilities, and you'll see that in a minute when we go through the numbers. As we've already found, and as I'm sure we'll continue to find as we move through this process, the governance change has added some complexities to the traditional renewal and replacement process. We have a team of folks that works on these financial product analyses, including staff from Bond Counsel, Disclosure Counsel, our independent financial advisor, as well as folks from GRU's internal finance staff. This group is dedicated to exploring all the options that we've got available for renewing these facilities that are coming due in May. And we've identified 5 particular options that we want to talk about tonight. First is the traditional competitive process, an RFP to renew or replace. Second is negotiating an extension with the current provider, which is Barclays. 3 and 4 are very similar. They both contemplate immediately redeeming the underlying bonds. Number 3 is using GRU cash to do those redemptions. Number 4 is accessing a line of credit that we have with U.S. Bank. And then finally, the 5th one is exercising a term out provision that exists in the current agreement with Barclays. And so we've calculated the estimated cost of these options and comparing them to what we call in a base case agreement. And that base case projection is simply taking the existing current agreement, rolling it, assuming it's going to roll over every 3 years, as it does now at the current level of cost. And so we've assigned an estimated interest rate to those variable rate bonds through their maturity. And we're assuming that in the base case that the facility cost is going to remain constant at 54 basis points. And as you can see, that base case number turns out to be about $170.2 million in debt service and facility fees through the final maturity in 2042. So option 1 is the traditional process. Essentially, that means we're going to put together an RFP. PFM will distribute it to a pool of banks. The team will evaluate it. They'll pick a preferred provider based on that evaluation, and they'll enter document negotiation. There are some benefits to this process. Number 1, it's, like I said, it's traditional, it's familiar, we've used it in the past. It allows us, if we so choose, to continue that current amortization schedule on the new facility that we showed you earlier. And there are a number of banks out there that provide liquidity facilities, and we know that. And the possibility is that there's somebody that we're not doing business with now that will respond to that, and we may be able to expand the pool of banks that we do business with. There are also a number of drawbacks associated with it. Number 1, it takes some time. It's a 60 to 90-day process if everything goes smoothly, and so we need to get that started right away. There's always a little bit of uncertainty when we put out an RFP about what the range of responses that we're going to be, and that's certainly going to be the case now since we're working through the new law and the governance changes. This process also requires an updated disclosure document. It's an offering memorandum, which is just slightly less work and intensity than the full official statement. It also requires a ratings update, and with any ratings process, we run the possibility of potential downgrade risks and the costs that are concomitant with those with those reductions. PFM has estimated that the cost of going through this process, the responses that we'll get back are probably about 20 basis points higher than the facility fee price that we're working with now. That translates to about $3.8 million in increased costs through the final maturity. Second is negotiating an extension with the current provider, Barclays. The good news is that they've indicated that they at least have some interest in this discussion. It's potentially a fairly straightforward process. We'd amend the current agreement. Typically, and I don't necessarily like to use that word, but generally an extension is the lower cost option. This one, we wouldn't require credit ratings. It doesn't require additional disclosure. So the lift on staff and on our the professionals on the team is a little less, and so the cost is a little bit lower. But there are some drawbacks associated with it. Barclays has also told us they're going to need the same set of legal opinions that for this round that they received when we did the original agreement back in 21. Without a successful bond validation process, and we don't anticipate that the bond validation process will be complete by May of 2024, it's likely that we're going to need additional steps in order for bond counsel to be able to deliver those legal opinions. Some of those steps are amending the current House Bill 1645 language and a request from the GRU authority to the City Commission that they adopt a resolution that substantially just reaffirms some delegation of authority to the previous general manager slot that they had adopted back when those original documents were put in place in 2021. The estimated cost here is about 10 basis points more than the current liquidity fee, so that translates to about $1.9 million more than the base case over the life of the agreements. The next two, like I said before, next two options contemplate redemption of the underlying bonds immediately in May of 2024. This first one is with GRU cash, and essentially pretty straightforward transaction. Write a check for $105 million plus. That eliminates the need for the credit facilities because the underlying bonds are gone, so you don't need the support. It takes $105 million off our balance sheet in principal and debt immediately. It doesn't require ratings or disclosure associated with the others. But there are some significant drawbacks to this. Number one, you've got to identify $105 million in cash to be able to make that payment. That has a significant impact to our liquidity. Our liquidity metrics are probably the primary element that support our bond ratings where they are today with the three rating agencies. So there's some significant downgrade risk from this alternative. We're likely to get a downgrade from each of the rating agencies from this. We pay $105 million in cash to liquidate these bonds immediately. We're more than likely going to need to do something to replace that cash. It could augur for some rate increases to do that. And working through the complexities with the new law is going to at least lengthen the time between now and when we might be able to issue bonds if that was the choice we made to replenish that cash. The projected cost of redemption, you'll see this in number 3, is significantly less than the base case because we're immediately paying those bonds off. You're avoiding about 18 years worth of debt service payments and facility fee payments by doing it this way. It's about $65.6 billion less. Once again, this is option 4. This is the same basic process. It's redemption of the underlying bonds, but this time it's using our line of credit with U.S. Bank rather than using GRU cash. The process here would be we would use the line of credit facility to redeem the bonds, and then we would at some point in the not too distant future issue fixed rate debt to pay off that line of credit draw. Pretty straightforward transaction. Once again, eliminates the need for the credit facilities. If we choose, we can retain the similar amortization structure that you saw earlier when we issue the new fixed rate debt. No ratings process, no disclosure. But it carries the same issues in terms of liquidity impact. The $105 million, it's likely to cause downgrades. The interest on that line of credit draw is higher than our traditional base case interest, and we'd have to, deal with, with the issues associated with an accelerated repayment schedule on the line of credit. If we assume that it would be 1 year between the time when we actually draw down on the line of credit to redeem the bonds and when we issue the fixed rate debt to replace that, PFM's estimating that the cost, and that we keep a similar amortization schedule, that the cost of this alternative is about $55.8 million higher than the base case. And then finally is the utilizing and exercising the term out provision under the current facility. Essentially what would happen there is we'd use the facility, Barclays would step in and pay off the underlying bondholders. They make the $105 million payment. We would issue into a, excuse me, what is essentially a bank loan with Barclays over up to 5 years to repay that $105 million. But it's going to be at a significantly higher interest rate than what we're paying now. Same set of benefits. We don't need the credit facilities. The bonds are paid off over 5 years. At the end of that 5-year period, we'd have that $105 million off our balance sheet for principal and interest. It's got its own set of drawbacks. Number one, it is an unusual transaction. You don't see it in the market very often. Because of that, it could likely pose some reputational risk to GRU since it's not seen naturally. It's got a much higher interest rate, somewhere around 11%, because this is not an option that the bank really finds appealing either. So it's that interest rate is going to be punitive when you enter into this. It would be considered most likely a material event under the SEC disclosure rules. We'd have to disclose it. We'd have to disclose it when we issue debt in each offering up for the next 5 years. It's still a significant use of cash, even though it's over 5 years. You're talking about, if it's 5, you're talking about $28 million a year or so to make that payment. And it is unclear if Barclays would agree to the term out. It's not like I said, it's not used very often. It's not really favored on either side, to be honest. Once again, we've got the same downgrade risk because of hit to the liquidity, and it would could trigger higher fees for the other debt. It's paying that payment off over 5 years instead of 18 under the current amortization schedule. So the total payout's about $32.7 million less than the base case. So this is just a summary. You can see the cost of the 5 options up there. When you factor in the cost, the impact on our liquidity, the rating agency considerations, and the complexity of execution, option 2 is probably the preferable alternative. But remember, these are simply estimates. So staff's recommendation when we get down into the line is to run option 1, which is the traditional process, in parallel with option 2, which is negotiating an extension with Barclays. So the path forward, there's several actions that we believe may be needed to extend the facility with Barclays. The first is making a request of the legislature that we add some amending language to the law. And basically what that language would do is would provide greater certainty for the enforceability of bonds authorized by the authority and simplify any future bond validations. It would give the authority, it would have them expressly assume all the obligations under our GRU's bond resolution, and as well as give the express authority to the board here to extend liquidity facilities and lines of credit. It would clarify any conflicts with the amendment to the charter and the bond resolution that the resolution would control. And it would make the prior delegations made by the city commission to the general manager now apply to the new CEO/GM role. the authority would also make a request of the city commission to adopt a companion resolution. And essentially, the substance of it would be simply asking the city commission to reaffirm some actions taken by prior city commissions that authorize the general manager to execute extensions to these liquidity facilities and credit enhancement facilities. So the conclusion is if we're not successful in executing an extension or doing a renewal or replacement through option one, we're more than likely going to have to take these facilities out through an immediate redemption. We believe that's going to result in some significant negative impacts on our liquidity positions, and which would result in some rating downgrades and increased financing costs. One other point, as you'll see if you look at the body of the resolution, is that we've talked about these three facilities because they're time sensitive. They're expiring in May of 2024. We have 4 other credit enhancement facilities that are expiring over the next 18 months. We have rolled the authorization for the general manager to execute extensions or drawdowns on the lines of credit into this resolution. These are the 4 credit enhancement facilities that would be impacted by that language in the resolution. So the recommendations for the authority: authorize the CEO GM to initiate a simultaneous process, issue an RFP soliciting proposals for renewing, replacing the facilities supporting 2005C, 2006A, and 2012B variable rate demand bonds, pursue negotiations of an extension of these liquidity facilities with Barclays, and seek legislative fixes to charter amendments to provide for additional clarity for the extension or replacement of the liquidity facilities. So the proposed resolution that we're asking you to adopt would authorize the extension of all credit enhancement facilities on our variable rate utility system revenue bonds, authorize an advance on lines of credit if any of those existing credit enhancement facilities are unable to be extended or substituted, and request the city commission of the city of Gainesville to take actions, and those actions are adopting that companion resolution that I referenced. And that's it. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have, and as the CEO, general manager mentioned, Mike Weiner is here from Holland and Knight if you have any specific questions for him.
And Mr. Chair, the one thing I would add is we've been working with the city attorney to have the portion that we're asking the city commission to approve the resolution, to have that on the December 14th city commission meeting. And so he is had worked with Holland and Knight to make sure we have an agenda item, and we'll bring that forth if the board approves that tonight.
Okay. Board members, any questions, thoughts, or a motion?
My concerns are messing with the legislative aspect of it. That's above us. I don't feel that we're qualified to jump into that arena. But the part 1 and 2, I think are okay.
Actually, the legislative aspect of it, I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at there. What is it that we as the authority need?
So I'll jump in a little bit, and then Claudia or Mark, you all can jump in as well. So there's some language, if there's going to be a legislative change that can help clarify things that's currently in the law and in the charter, there's some language that we have asked Holland and Knight, if we put that language in there, it would help clarify the ability for the authority to do that. And particularly addresses the change from general manager. One of the things that change from general manager to CEO general manager, to make sure that authority is with the CEO general manager. And so what we would do is simply offer that language. We don't have the ability to legislate. We would offer that language to a legislator to see if they would want to include that in any change in the legislative language.
And that's for bond issuance, and that's, if I'm correct, that's what we're looking at doing here. That's the purpose of this.
So if I could invite bond counsel, Michael Weiner, up to address those questions.
Great.
It's probably best to hear from the attorney.
Sure. Good evening, thanks. Yeah, so the three areas, they were all relating to bonds, and they all go back to a lot of the issues we discussed the last time I was here. So the three recommendations that we would have is, we talked last time about proceeding with a bond validation. That will be helpful. Bond validations are done on a per bond basis, so each bond is validated. But what you get when you validate precedent, so that future court decisions would look back at prior case decisions, and you would have stare decisis to follow the precedent. But what we would propose is kind of a unique option where after that initial validation, if there was any ever questions, litigation pending, you'd be able to validate by publication, and you publish in the newspaper that you're proceeding with a bond issue, and if any citizens object, then it puts the burden on them to file in the court, and that would start the bond validation proceeding. It kind of flips it around. It's been used in one other special district down on the East Coast, so we thought that was a helpful thing with this board, as much litigation as there is currently pending. So the second item that we would recommend is there has been some challenges in the fact that prior delegations made by the city commission went to the general manager for utilities. That position was removed under the charter amendments, and a new position of general manager or executive director, CEO, I think is the right term, was created. So you sort of have this mismatch of who was delegated if that position is no longer there. So that would be a delegation, a delegatory fix to help with that transition, which helps with what we're trying to do here as far as the renewals and future renewals, and try to bridge that gap. The last thing was more clarifying language. There was a provision in there which talked about conflicts. We would recommend that provision be a little bit more direct as to not conflicting with any provisions of the bond resolution, so that the new charter amendments are, to the extent that there's any inconsistencies, couldn't be read to override anything in the bond resolution. And that's directly reacting to, one, some of the litigation that's been already pending, and second, questions that I've been fielding from different councils of some of the various credit facilities that are out there.
Any questions?
I'm still a little confused by this. I mean, this going to the legislature, is that because we don't feel like we have the authority to do what we want to do? Or is this based on the fact that bond companies need specific language? Which is it?
I would say it's the second one, and Mike, you can speak to
Are
that
you
more.
advising that we need this additional language in the bill? Is that what you're saying?
I heard it would simplify. Is that?
Right, we're trying to make your process easier in the future. We're trying to mitigate any potential challenges in the future. We're trying to make your process better, right? And it's not
When you
unusual.
say,
Oh, I'm sorry.
excuse me, when you say potential challenges, who do you think is going to challenge this?
Currently, there's a number of lawsuits, right, pending, challenging the bill, and whether it's in state or federal court. And I couldn't predict what happens in the future. And
But the bond companies are not going to challenge it. You're talking about third parties now that are going to challenge it?
correct, right.
That was good clarification. Thank you.
Anybody else? I would say, like Mr. Coates, I don't want to try to rewrite legislation up here. I think what I understood, and please correct me, is that we were going to send a suggestion, not a demand.
Correct.
Is that what I'm hearing?
That's
Okay, I want
correct.
to see a lot of, because I don't think that's our job up here. I think we're working off of the bill, but if there's a way to clarify and originally when we talked, I thought it was to, make sure to make the bond agencies comfortable. So they can issue the bonding prior to and then through bond validation.
Right, you have two things going on. One is, the first one that we talked about is the validation. So if you have any challenges in the future, there's any risk out there, to try to create a process that is simpler, i.e. less expensive, than going to court each time that you have a bond issue and there's some uncertainty in the market, that we could handle it through publication. Normally, that's not needed. This authority obviously has had a lot of litigation filed, more than most, and this would be a way of simplifying that in the future if as bond issues progress and if things haven't been resolved. And the other two are intended to facilitate future transactions and to give the banks comfort, to give us as council comfort that that gap between the general manager and the CEO and executive director has been sufficiently bridged.
I think that we need to proceed under the assumption that the law gives us whatever authority we need to do what we need to do. And so,
Well,
I mean,
that-
I.
Yeah, I mean,
getting
that's
back-
the decision of this board. So I'm asking either for a motion, a no motion, a modified motion. But if there's no motion, we proceed forward to the next item.
Okay.
Well, I think we have to make a motion. I mean, we've got to address the liquidity.
Yeah, I'm just sort of, and I'm not trying to be, hand grenade guy, but, that's the procedure here. So as the chair, I'm just letting you know what our options are.
Do we all agree that we don't want to mess with the legislative aspects of
Well,
this?
I think we need to get a motion on the floor,
Yeah.
rather than open discussion.
I'd like to make a motion to accept 1 and 2, but not mess with the legislative aspect of this.
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Would some citizens like to talk to the motion on the floor?
Mr. Chair, Jim Conish, would you please ask Holland and Knight who pays them? Would you please ask Holland and Knight who they represent? Would you please ask Mr. Nee who pays him, who hires him, who fires him, and who's he representing here? This is a $1,000 an hour attorney. Why isn't he not reading 7.03 1E, right below the language they want to modify? There's very precise language on how these refinances work. You're going to cut me off, but it's very, very precise. It mentions bond validation, but it doesn't mention the authority paying for it. And he needs to have the city commission pay him and Holland and Knight for these bond validations, or have Hutch pay for it, because he's the one filing the litigation that creates the need for this. Now, I have a solution. I have a change that will clear the residency issue up, and it's on the very last page. I want to add 3 words. Members have to be a qualified elector of the city, except that a minimum, but not a maximum, of 1 initial member must be a resident of the unincorporated area. And and you could say bye-bye to Hutch's litigation. It's gone, and we don't need Holland and Knight. So I want to know why this $1,000 an hour attorney does not mention a section exactly on point that makes it crystal clear what the authority's powers are. There's no doubt at all that you can refinance this debt without Holland and Knight and without Nee.
Thank you very much, sir. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Angela Castile. So on May 11th, 2023 at 5:24 p.m., there was a letter from Chris Lover, an email, to several people. And in this letter, it specifically states, so Barclays believes they can proceed under some timing considerations, close after July 1st, when the new board is in effect. I am not sure how this answers their questions or issues, since the authorization is needed in June and will be by the city commission. Talk tomorrow. There were also Barclays questions that the city attorney answered. So I'm still confused as to why they did not move forward with the bond issuance and then they went to another bank. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Debbie Martinez. This is a glaring example of why we need to be airing these meetings on Cox Channel 12, because we don't really have a newspaper. The Gainesville Sun were cheerleaders for the city commission getting into this biomass boondoggle. And residents, GRU customers, are used to watching government meetings live on Cox Channel 12, and they need to see that you all, so far in the few short meetings you've had, are doing a far better job than our city commissioners did over the last 15-plus years. So please consider doing that, and I appreciate you all doing such an excellent job. We haven't had critical thinking skills in leadership since 2008. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please. Okay, seeing none, bringing it back to the board for discussion. And staff, any input?
So, Mr. Chair, I do think it would be worthwhile to have Mike from Holland and Knight say again the risks associated with not having that clarity in the legislation. So, Mike, I don't know if there's a way to emphasize what those risks would be if we don't do that on the path forward.
So before Mr. Weiner speaks, if I could just speak for just a moment. I just want to strip it down, not attorney language. It will make it easier in the long run to put those things in the law. It's not required. We can still move forward with different things that we need to do. What we cannot do is issue new debt or refinance without the bond validation. You've got two different things happening here. So I just wanted to kind of get it simple and just put it out there just like that. So
Right, and
thank
just
you, Mike.
clarification, without the bond validation, I see your point there, but also whether we vote on putting this language or presenting this language, we're not putting it in anywhere. Anybody out there can email the legislature, and they're watching, someone's watching. So the language is out there. So if it's wise language, I'm sure someone will pick up on it. So I'm not really concerned about it. I mean, what we have is a group of people, a lot of people wanting the right thing to happen. We're just trying to figure out how to get there. So, just a couple of minutes if you would, sir.
Sure, Mike Weiner, Holland Knight again.
Clarification, I've heard numerous times you're $1,000 an hour. Is that what you are?
He is not $1,000 an
Thank you.
hour.
I know that. That's
I'm willing to though, if that's.
No,
the
no, I
motion of the board.
just wanted to, but
Okay.
it's not that much because I did ask that question, so.
You did, thank you.
I'll talk to you later about it. I mean, I don't have the number in front of me, but it's substantially less. Go ahead.
All right, so we've obviously analyzed that bill fairly well. We've looked at the bill before it was enacted. There's. The point of this is twofold. One is to make your operations easier. If to the extent that there's future challenges, we don't have to go back to court. That's gonna save you money, that's gonna save you time, right? Secondly, it's gonna help with the bond validation. There's some questions. If we can get these fixed right now, we can avoid some of those questions. The banks have concerns. The banks have been raising concerns. This is intended to address legislatively some of the concerns that have been addressed. If you don't decide to move forward with it, we'll move ahead. Just makes the bond validation a little bit harder, and it makes some of what we have to do more challenging for you.
Good, thank you very much. With the maker of the motion, would you clarify your motion just so?
Sure, there was a recommendation from staff. It was a 3-point recommendation to move forward with the number 1 option and the number 2 option. And their recommendation was number 3 to add some legislative language. And that's the part I'm nixing on that. So
Okay.
just to move forward with staff recommendation on number 1 and 2.
Okay, is the clerk clear with that motion, or do you want that read in? The recommendations individually?
Mr. Chair, I'm clear on it.
Okay, no problem. So we have a motion on the floor. We've had public comment. All in favor?
Can I just, we also have in the recommendation about move the resolution language, to approve the resolution language, and for the city commission to approve the resolution language. Can that be included if that's
The recommendation is on 2 slides,
Right.
so I think that's what's confusing the matter. So if we can bring up those 2 slides again, that would be very
That
helpful.
would be extremely helpful.
Thank you.
So I think Member Coates was referencing this slide, and then the next slide. Someone's advancing as well, right?
So just to be clear, we want to have the resolution from here. And then there's gonna be basically a companion resolution that the attorney is preparing for the city commission, which will be heard on the 14th.
Correct.
And that is to give comfort, for all practical purposes, for the bond issuance at this point, because we do not have bond validation for the new authority at this point.
I think we're mixing the terms.
Go ahead.
So-
I mean, no, that's why I was sort of, I want to make sure we're on the same page.
In substance, that resolution that the city commission will be approving will be reaffirming prior delegations that they had made to the general manager position as it existed prior to the law to extend the liquidity facilities and credit enhancement facilities and draws on the line of credit, to extend that delegation to the new CEO/GM position, because that is its title under the new law.
To extend it,
The
When
courtesy or
when
the
original
authority.
document, when the original resolution for the current liquidity facility agreement was put together, there was authorization from the city commission that delegated to the general manager the authority to extend those liquidity facilities when they came upon expiration. The position of general manager, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, was eliminated under the law. It was replaced by CEO GM. This companion resolution for the city commission would essentially reaffirm that delegation of authority that was prior given to the GM, would extend that to the CEO GM to make it consistent with the resolution that this authority is going to.
okay, for the comfort
Yes.
of the bond
Yes.
issuers.
So that would be 1, 2, and 3. I'm going back to the maker of the motion.
Could we bring the recommendation back up, please?
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's clarify this bad boy.
Yep. That's why I almost think reading it in might, just for clarification, because I'm not sure we're on the same page.
I'm gonna request to have the motion removed from the table based on the convolutedness of it and recommend that staff bring us back something that's clear.
So you're wanting to park it tonight, table it, or later on this evening? Because there is an urgency on this one.
I would be completely okay with later on this evening. If staff could clarify this in a bullet point aspect so that we as the board have an understanding what we're trying to put on the table.
Would it be helpful if we read the portions into the record for voting? Or do you want us to actually put it in bullet point format for later?
Bullet point would be useful.
Bullet point,
Okay.
please.
Okay.
So we'll ask the clerk to do that. Thank you.
And when we do that, we want to remove the legislative language from that.
Correct, I don't feel comfortable with that aspect.
So we'll do all of it except for that number 3 on this slide, everything else.
So we're going to be tabling this till some time in the meeting prior to the adjournment.
When staff says we're good to go, we'll jump back on.
We'll insert it. Everybody good?
Yes.
Okey dokey. Next item.
Mr. Chair, the next item is 2023-1149, expanded discussion of November 15th, 2023 topics regarding a variety of items.
So, Mr. Chair, at the previous workshop, we started to get into a little bit of detail and discussion from the board members regarding the government services contribution and the net debt reduction plan and the flow of funds in the utility. We wanted to take some of that feedback, bring back tonight some of the information that was requested. And really, this is to continue to build on that foundation as we get into the budget meetings in January. So our CFO, Claudia Raznick, will give a additional presentation, getting to some more of the details and answering some of those questions. So Claudia.
There we go. Thank you, Robin. So everybody can hear me okay? Okay. So there are a couple of topics inside of this presentation. I'll move pretty quickly because you've heard some of these topics already. We're just building on some of those foundational concepts. So the first piece we'll talk about are the flow of funds, the GFT, which is the general fund transfer, now known as the Government Services Contribution, so GSC. I will flip in and out of the acronym, so bear with me with that. The net debt reduction plan, the appendix has some additional information that some of the board members has asked for in the past, so we've just included those. I will not go through the appendix because it is quite long. The flow of funds concept of the utility, I think we covered at the last workshop, but essentially it sets our rate-making process and the budgetary process. So what the general manager wanted to be discussed on this particular slide are the different portions of the flow of funds that he will be looking at as far as increases in revenues, et cetera. So that's why you see certain lines highlighted. So as part of the planning process going forward, potentially increasing revenues, potentially decreasing O&M, so that's operation and maintenance expense, or taking a look at the base rates. And so that's why you see the line excess revenue, debt defeasance from excess revenue, because those are excess base rate revenues that are being moved into debt defeasance, and then also the government services contribution, all topics that have come up in the past. So for the FY24 budget process, these are the numbers that we landed with, and I've tried to put it in the a format that we've used in the past because it, at least in my mind, it's a little bit more simple. So you have the revenues coming in and then you're paying out for things. So we're paying out for expenses, which are fuel. So revenues for 2024 are expected to be $461 million. Expenses for fuel 108, O&M, which operations and maintenance, labor and non-labor, 157. Net revenues are 196 million. There is essentially a movement in and out of something called rate stabilization. It's essentially the savings account. So sometimes at the end of the month, you have a little bit left over or you don't, and you're pulling funds in and out. So rate stabilization stabilizes the rates. It does what it's designed to do. And then after all of that, there's something called a use of net revenues where we're paying out certain cash payments. So we're collecting revenues from our customers, we're paying all of the expenses to run the utility, and then we have to pay off the debt service. We have debt defeasance, utility plant improvement fund, which is also used for capital improvement, and then the general fund transfer, the GSC, is the very last payment that the utility makes. So I'll pause there before I move into the next topic. Are there any questions on the flow of funds? Okay. So the GFT or the GSC, you saw the slide at the last meeting, so it shows over time what the general fund transfers look like and the reduction in 2024. We had a request for data as far as other utilities, and so this is what this slide is reflecting. So you can see it's as a percent of revenue. The utility, it looks generally fine. We're looking at a percent of revenue when you're comparing it to other utilities, other municipalities. The issue with GRU, the debt service, comes in after that metric. So it's important when we're talking about a percent of operating revenue, the general fund transfer does seem low, and you can see the numbers here, 6, 3, and 2. But when you take in the $103 million of debt service that have to be paid out of that, it becomes a different discussion. So we've had some questions, conversations surrounding HB 1645 about the cap on the general fund transfer. So I've just put this language in here so that everyone's aware. So it's essentially after the deductions for the flow of funds and the general fund transfer, after all those payments are made, anything goes to debt service. So inside of the law, they put parameters around what is available to spend on the general fund transfer, and then whatever's left over moves over into debt service. We've also had some questions, communications about franchise fees, et cetera. I've just dropped this in here just to start that conversation, that there may be some future conversations on franchise fees, right-of-ways. GRU, general government, have I would say, an intricate relationship because we've been together for the entire existence of the city. we have relations as far as the right of ways that we use that they can control. And so we might have to have some future conversations if the city commission or general government move forward with changing some of those relationships. And I think those discussions are starting right now. So I think the city attorney's office is working with the chief operating officer, so some of that's starting now. I just wanted to point that out because those are parts of some future discussions. Okay. And some of the options we've been looking at internally, and this isn't designed to provide recommendations this evening. It's just saying we're doing the work on what these options will look like when we bring them back. I'm expecting at some future meeting, we'll be bringing those options back for the board to take a look at. So it's keeping the general fund transfer, the GSC, as projected through 2033. And that's currently what's built into the net debt reduction plan. Possibly the lower the general fund transfer, the GSC, possibly for the base rate increases, or we could eliminate it altogether. Another option is to keep the GSC flat to the 2024 levels. There have been some questions from certain members as far as an overpayment in the past, and so we're still working up those mechanics as well. So I'll
Let
pause
me hit a
there.
pause button. I have a question, if you don't mind. It's not some, you know, and I respect the city for looking at what their options are. That's what they're supposed to do, and I'm glad they're doing it. But also for us, as I'm going to different meetings and hearing different things, I'm learning about, well, we did this and, you know, we undergrounded, we did this. It really didn't benefit the GRU. It wasn't a business decision for the GRU, but ultimately it benefited the city of Gainesville. Are we looking at those? Because I just sat in a $6 million conversation yesterday that has no benefit to the city, to GRU, but it really benefited the future growth of city of Gainesville. So because there was one boss, it was like, well, let's do it. You know, as you said, we were so married, we didn't really draw a line. So are we looking at what wasn't really beneficial to GRU, but yet to the city? And looking at how we get our money back?
I'll defer to the general manager.
Yeah, so we have not been looking back at decisions made in the past related to, like you're talking about, undergrounding on a certain road or anything like that. But that is something, if the board gives us direction and that is something we want to do.
And I respect that. I mean, they're looking at what their options are. I think we need to be, how did we get where we're at?
Yeah, so what, so
This
Mr.
wasn't by design or desire.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, we're looking at how do those relationships look going forward.
Okay.
But if there is a desire to do that, that is.
Well, I sort of want to, I don't want to get off topic too much, but it's sort of like, okay, here's where we're at. We're divorced now. And here's our payments. And by the way, going forward, I want to be equal and fair. But in the past, we put a lot of burden on you and you picked up the bill. We need to adjust going forward. Also, we just need to keep that in mind, how that's going to look.
Well,
So-
I think there's another aspect too. You know, we're divorced, right?
Well,
But
there's still some payments
we
going there.
really don't know where we are.
Right.
We don't know where we are. I mean, I think ultimately we may end up with some kind of an audit that really seriously looks at every expenditure to know what in effect is necessary and what is not for GRU. And the more we get into this, the more I think we're gonna be forced to do something like that. I certainly don't know where we are. And it seems like in every meeting, I hear something else about, some particular relationship that the city has with GRU that I didn't know anything about. And I don't know what it costs. And at some point, we're gonna have to get a grip on all of those costs.
Right, and I think that's what we need to do, is be very realistic, because should we look at a modifier and we could say, well, we respect that, but here's how we got there, how much of that do you want to own? I said it at the last meeting. I mean, we're bearing the debt, a lot of debt.
Yep.
So I just want to look at that.
Yeah, can I just follow up on Member
Yes.
Caro? So again, we're on a path through the budget process where we are going to talk about each of those relationships and have recommendations on, or do we stop or do we continue the relationship? Do we redefine it? Are we getting the value that we're paying for that? So we're going to have those recommendations in February, at the February 7th meeting, where we're going to hit those relationships. What I want to make sure is if the board wants us to go backwards, we're not doing that analysis. We've been looking forward at what those look like going forward. And so if that's direction the board wants to give, we would we could do that and go backwards and look at that as
So I
well.
misunderstood the conversation you and I had then, because I asked you, how many things have we paid for that weren't to the benefit of the utility running a utility? And let's say it was 50% utility, 50% city, but we bore the debt.
Right.
And I thought you said, well, we have a list of that, or do you have an idea of that?
We have ideas of
Okay.
that, but we don't
I
have.
would love to see it, just, I mean, not that we're gonna pull out the magic paper and say, hey, look
Yeah.
at this, but we need to know how we got where we're at. And so if all of a sudden someone wants to change an agreement and say, hey, we wanna start getting cash for this, well, okay, let's wait 15 years because we need to recover this. And just a good ledger, that's all, it's business. I expect them to look at theirs, they should. They have a fiduciary responsibility, we're gonna look at ours. Sorry about that, ma'am, I really went around on you.
Thank you, Chair. May I continue?
By all
All
means,
right.
it's the only way to shut me up.
Were there any other questions on the general fund transfer, the GSC, before I move into the net debt
Numbers?
reduction plan?
I would personally like to know, as the CFO of GRU, what you would do specifically in regard to the general fund transfer. And as simplistic of language as possible, what would you do?
I think it's a complicated answer.
Fair enough.
Okay, thank you.
I see we have a very vocal, supportive person, Commissioner Brian Eastman. Can you come up to the podium,
Well-
Mr. Commissioner? I-
Okay.
We,
Yeah, because we would have to extend that to I think we're in conversation right now.
well, he represents the city. on
Yeah,
that
he's
side
here
of
as
it.
a citizen right now, an
Okay.
observer, just like I see the union rep back there. I just,
Union rep?
yeah, fire union reps
Hey,
back there.
hey,
So-
buddy.
But
How's it
that's
going?
what I'm saying. I just think that we want to,
The point that I wanted to make is that when do we, as the GRU authority, get to sit down with Mr. Eastman and his group and literally have a real conversation so we can understand?
we're having those talks now. The mayor and I have had that conversation about doing a joint meeting. Mr. Eastman and I have had that conversation. And I think my response to Mr. Eastman is I'd like the board to get up to speed. So when we're having those conversations, we're not being talked to or told. We're asking good questions and we're up to speed on our knowledge. Because if we go into the swimming pool without knowledge to swim, we could drown.
Is that where the February 7th or the February meeting comes in to give us that much time to be able to dive into that?
Well, I think everybody's diving in, from what I'm understanding, individually and asking questions, and I think
Right.
we're all getting up to speed. I do have, an advantage of being here before, but I don't want to, I would hate to sit down with the city and not have us be knowledgeable at that point. I think it would not be productive. So.
Okay, I just
Yeah,
want to
so
open that
just so you know,
dialogue so
yeah.
that you understand that, hey, we got to have a conversation at some point together.
Yeah, and just as it would have, typically, like I said, the chair and the mayor are having those conversations. I think we've even maybe looped you in one, but just sort of how would that look and stuff like that. So that's what we're looking at going forward. The county has reached out to us and they would also like to sit down with us at some point and just have conversation. So I just wanted everybody to be up to speed before we did too much talking.
Sounds good.
Chair, a point of order.
Well,
Are there going to be motions on these matters at the end, like? we're
On
going
this
away-
here, this is simply informational.
So there's no action taken on any of this?
On what she's presenting right now is informational, correct? There's no action recommendation, sir. Okay,
Well, I think you should take action.
okay. Continue, please. Thank you.
Could you pull the presentation back up, please? Oh, thank you. So moving from the general fund transfer into the net debt reduction plan. So in April, when the plan was provided to the city commission and approved, these were the parameters in that plan. The next slide that I'll show you has quite a few numbers on it, but it will show the projected results of that plan from April. And then the next two slides are where we're at now. So they're very busy. So I'm not going to read this slide to you. I just want to provide this to you for information. This one actually shows the projections. And so our beginning outstanding debt when we started this process, was 1.7 billion. We issued money this past year to fund our capital infrastructure projects, which we do have to do. So the debt went up and then it's scheduled to go back down. So that's why you see a movement from 1.7 to 1.8 up in the upper left. And then we're projected to be at 1.4 at the end of 2033. This was back in April of 2023. So this is a complicated slide. Apologize. There's a lot of numbers on the slide, but as you move left to right, I think all of us can pretty much follow. You start out with the overall debt, what we're expected to issue, pay down for the principal pieces, and part of the plan in April was to complete the general fund transfer, the GSC reductions. The excess reserves are coming from excess base rate revenues, and then projected budget cuts from the utility. So in the calculation itself, we have the unamortized bond premium less our cash levels, which equal net debt, and then divided by capital assets. We didn't create this formula. It's from a rating agency, but essentially what it defines is leverage, if you think about it that way. So we're projected to move from 86.99 to 70.53%, and this was back in April. There have been some changes based upon the budget process and some of the results coming out of that. So because of the reduction in the general fund transfer, we have more cash available for either capital projects or debt defeasance. So we're not scheduled to issue as much debt in '26. So the projections are already showing a positive benefit of the reduction in the general fund transfer because our projected debt issuance is right around 60 million and it was right around 120. So we're already seeing some positive impacts from that. Another change are the interest rates have changed. So everybody's aware that interest rates have been moving. And our projected pay down on debt issuances, we're trying to levelize it now. So going forward, we'll levelize the principal payments and not necessarily the debt service. So this is another busy schedule. And the key takeaway here is our debt to capitalization ratio after the issuance this past June is 89.47%, and our ending number is 71. I did want to point out, projections are not a perfect process, right? So we will be monitoring this as we move forward, and if the board changes the plan, then we'll adjust accordingly. So that is really a lot of numbers on a page. Any questions before I move forward into the next slides?
Sort of a statement, and I'm, again, just one person up here. This is something the city commission put in plan, and I don't know what you guys are saying to the CEO and the other employees. My conversation with the CEO is, we have a plan, let's improve it. Let's figure out how to pay off more debt. Let's get more aggressive. As the CFO explained, things can change. This is a projection. It's not a guarantee. So let's try to always be aggressive on debt reduction. Look at assets, don't nobody panic, but we got the power district and everything that's been planned. Let's get aggressive. Let's sell it. Let's pay down debt. Let's be very deliberate. So even though the city commission put this in place, I think it's a wheel that's rolling already. I think we can modify and add to it and get more aggressive if we want. So that's my thoughts on it. Any other questions or statements or?
Those are similar to my conversations. The only thing that we've also discussed is just ensuring that we give our bond holders confidence that, we're going to achieve this is at a minimal.
Yeah.
So just that confidence that we're not veering off and going in different directions that would create instability but otherwise, I'm asking the same questions.
Do you guys feel it? I mean, one time we can talk. Do you feel the same way? Just add to it and get more debt reduction if we can? Or do you see, revisiting it or?
I'm gonna let him answer first.
Well, I mean, I think debt reduction is certainly one of our major goals. Absolutely. And so whatever we can do to further that, I think it's our obligation to do that. Absolutely it is.
Well, I was saying, sort of going on the plan that's in place, but yet adding to it.
Sure.
Instead of trying
If
to
we can.
reinvent the wheel. And that's what I was sort of leaning towards. And that's what I think I heard from you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree.
Okay, great.
So these are the options currently under internal review to keep the plan as projected through 2033. We're about to roll into 2034 because we're hitting the 25 budget process. Lower the general fund transfer, the GSC, and add to the plan. Keep the GSC flat to 2024 levels. and apply additional savings to the plan unless the board sees differently, evaluate any further expense cuts and apply to the plan, change the principal pay down to levelized principal payments, and then address the street light payments change that occurred last year. And so that completes the knowledge transfer. Thank you.
A quick question. So this net reduction plan was initiated when?
I'm gonna do a short, long version. So GRU's debt has been increasing since 2004, 2005, but essentially doubled back in 2017. You fast forward, we bought out the PPA, brought that on as real debt. Since then, we've been trying to mitigate the debt. So in 2020, we had a series of transactions, 2021. Then in 2022, we had put in a formal debt defeasance policy with the city commission in October of 2022. Move forward into, it's February of 2023, the Joint Legislative Audit Committee asked for the mayor to come up to Tallahassee to talk about GRU's debt specifically. So while we had some plans in place, some funds moving into debt defeasance, you didn't really have the funding to really start to drive it down until after the JLAC meeting and after this plan was put into place in April. So, having a general fund transfer essentially cut in half for the city and applied to debt, that's what's really driving the plan dollars. So it's been a long time. The money to really drive it occurred this year, which is why the plan was put in place in April and the resolution is in May. So hopefully that helps.
So this net reduction plan was initiated after the Joint Legislative Committee.
Yes, I'll bifurcate it. So before JLAC, the
Right.
utility, the commission, general government, everybody's trying to work on the debt pieces, but also balance the general fund transfer payments. And that was slow going as we were moving forward. There's a long history to this that I would really like to go through with the board so that you can understand the history of it, because we didn't just start yesterday and we didn't start in February. February is when JLAC said, do something and do it now to the city of Gainesville, and that's why the plan was put in place in April.
Okay.
Thank you.
So are you comfortable with this plan? In other words, it wasn't done necessarily under duress. On the other hand, there was some impetus to developing this plan.
I would say that JLAC encouraged the mayor to put the plan in place
Yes.
with the city commission, yes.
And so GRU worked in conjunction with the city to come up with this plan. Are you comfortable with this plan?
So I would say at that point in time that we were working with the city commission balancing the needs of general government, at that point in time, we were comfortable with the plan to get to 70%. When you're looking at a utility and the amount of debt that we have, that 70 really should be lower. It should be somewhere between like 40, 60-ish%. So it could be better, yes.
So should we do something about that? Should we come up with another debt reduction plan or take a review of that plan as it exists and then think about moving forward?
I would say yes. I would say from
I
my,
think that's what we were just
Yeah.
talking about, taking
Okay.
this plan and adding to it,
Yeah,
so we
well,
can accelerate
Yeah,
it.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, would finish your comment?
I would say that the authority would, in my opinion, would need to affirm this plan, or we need to work on a different plan. And I think that's what the general manager was saying, is through the budget process, which is a long process, our budget goes 12 months of the year to adjust the plan. But you have to have funding. So it's not like I can go and say, we're gonna get to 60% without dollars. You need dollars to really drive that debt down, or cash up for that matter. So as the plan, or whatever plan that we're working on, as we move forward, the impacts get quicker and faster. So as long as you're putting dollars into that, you see the results faster. So for example, when I was talking about not issuing 120 million of debt, we're looking at 60 million. That's already a positive benefit to the utility. So to answer your question, if we had funds, absolutely.
And Mr. Chair, I'll add to that too. I think the complication becomes, as the CFO said, you need dollars. Well, dollars comes from revenue. Revenue sometimes is driven by rate increases. So I think with the board, we have to figure out what levers are we willing, what's the priority? Is the priority lowering rates? Is the priority lowering debt? And sometimes those are gonna be in conflict. They will be in conflict.
Sure.
And so that complicated aspect will be part of the budget process in making those decisions of where those dollars come from.
You good?
Okay.
Anybody else? Back at you.
Do we have?
Part of order, we're not,
The agenda says you will take action as deemed appropriate. We went over this at the workshop. We're here loaded for action.
we are taking action on certain items tonight. This was informational, this part here, sir.
Doesn't say that on the agenda.
Well,
So
I didn't
you'll
break it
take
down.
action as deemed-
Where needed, and we will, where needed. Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Chair, I think we're ready to bring back up the motion from the first item on
That'd be great.
liquidity facilities.
Okay.
So I think this includes all the pieces except for the piece about the legislative language change. That's the intent of this.
Yeah, those are the bullets. Those are the bullets from the two recommendation slides you saw before, absent number 3 on that first recommendation associated with the legislative fixes. It appears to me.
Maker?
I'm still reading.
Oh, no problem.
I turned 50 a few months ago, so the eyesight just isn't quite
Well,
there.
let me introduce you to 62.
Almost there, Craig, almost
No
there.
problem, buddy.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, so my motion is to adopt 1 and 2. Or move forward with 1 and 2. Up there.
Okay, they're not, I just want to clarify. Could I have someone read that in? Just because there's numbers there and there's not numbers on 1 and 2. So
Can I clarify?
Yes.
So staff recommendation is all of these.
that's
These
what
are
I think he's
options.
doing. Is that not?
Like everything on this page is what staff recommendation
Minus
is.
the legislative part.
We didn't include the legislative part per your instruction, but everything else we're recommending
Then what's the easiest way to make a motion on the whole page?
staff.
As
recommendation.
stated, but please ask staff to read it in.
As stated, and please have staff read it in. Make a motion.
Right? Sure.
Okay. Mr. Chair, the GRU authority authorized the CEO GM to initiate a simultaneous process to, 1, issue an RFP soliciting proposals for renewing, replacing the liquidity facilities supporting GRU Series 2005C, 2006A, and 2012B variable rate demand bonds. 2, pursue negotiations of an extension of these liquidity facilities with Barclays. The GRU authority adopt the proposed resolution. 1, authorizing the extension of all existing credit enhancement facilities with respect to certain outstanding variable rate utility system revenue bonds. 2, authorizing an advance on the lines of credit if an existing credit enhancement facilities are unable to be extended or substituted. 3, requesting the City Commission of the City of Gainesville to take certain actions in connection therewith consistent with Section 7.10 parentheses 1 of the Charter, which provides for the city to perform all actions necessary and proper to effectuate the orderly transition of governance.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second on the floor. We will take citizen comment at this point.
Mr. Chair, Jim Conish, in regard to your debt, if you look at the audited financial statement for 9/30/22, GRU long-term debt stood at 1.802 million. On page 108 of this presentation, 9/30/23, the debt stood at 1.849 million for an increase of $46 million in the last year, sir. So I don't know when you're gonna take an action on 1.3 million a month in a direct transfer, and who knows how much in indirect and possibly illicit transfers, free streetlights for the county, discounted streetlights for the city. I don't see the advantage of letting millions of dollars be siphoned off of GRU when they're staring at not only massive debt, but increasing debt. And then there's the issue of liabilities. Luckily, you're not personally liable for authority debts or liabilities because you're not getting paid, and I don't think you would want that. But the liabilities are considerably larger, sir, than the debt, decommissioning the power plants and the negative fuel levelization that is run up. This gentleman has no authority to lower the fuel adjustment charge. I'm glad he did. Why not 15 mils? It's not his decision. It's your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else like to speak to the motion on the floor?
Yes, I'm Debbie Martinez. Just briefly, it's important for all the board members to know that members of the Gainesville City Commission went on a 5 to 7 year hiring and spending spree, paying these new executive San Francisco-style salaries and expanding, the city programs to unsustainable, and they call them sustainability managers. And now they're wanting GRU ratepayers to bail them out. They didn't even bother to make any significant cuts to their budget, but they want us to keep paying for their incompetence. So please keep that in mind. They have done nothing to try to help GRU customers. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Couple of things. First off, I feel like what was discussed at the beginning of this part of the meeting, finding out that there's meetings with the mayor, and I feel that that should be publicized. I feel that that needs to be, if you want this to be transparent and you want it to work and you want the community to trust you, then it needs to be transparent and it needs to be publicized. 2, as far as the GSC goes, I'm not sitting in you guys' shoes, so no, I really don't know. But what I do know is that the city commission has, I need to think of a better word than that, but, has taken money and taken money and taken money from the citizens for too long. And the GSC needs to stop for at least 6 years. And then you can pay down debt with that GSC. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have another speaker? Seeing none at this time, bringing it back to the board. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Okay, yes, ma'am. Next item, please.
Mr. Chair, the next item is 2023-1150 interlocal agreement between Alachua County and the City of Gainesville for the acquisition of the trunked radio system. Please give us a moment when we pull that up.
No problem. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, Lewis Walton is here. He's our telecommunications officer. You've heard from him before. We've addressed this item at previous meetings. The purpose of tonight is really to get approval from the City Commission to move forward with a final sale agreement. Lewis will give a short presentation and then ultimately get to that recommendation.
Yeah, go ahead. We have a quorum.
So, Mr.
Whenever you're ready, sir.
Walton.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. I kind of want to go back a little bit and then forward to where we are today, kind of where we're going to carry on from there. Back at the November 1st board meeting, I explained what GRS is. It's an 800 megahertz license only for public safety and first responders and government agencies. It's a collection of antennas on cell towers connected to servers and routers that enable an 800 megahertz signal to be received and transmitted. It is not available for commercial use. And I do want to address an important aspect of the sale regarding that. Gainesville has an ordinance that restricts the selling of certain assets without a referendum. That would materially impact the capacity of Grucom to distribute telecommunications services. Although this is a radio system to communicate, it is not part of Grucom's core telecommunications system, but it does rely on our telecommunications system to operate effectively. The short answer here is that after legal review with the public safety, radio system does not reduce our ability to provide telecommunication services outside of this non-commercial system. And even Florida statutes support that. Grucom is a licensed CLEC in the state of Florida. And under the Florida statutes, Chapter 364.02, Communication Services, it goes in there to make some definitions of what those are. And in Section 13, a telecommunications company includes every corporation, partnership, and person and their lessees, trustees, or receivers appointed by any court whatsoever, and every political subdivision in the state offering two-way communication service to the public for hire within the state by the use of a telecommunication facility. The term telecommunication company does not include, and it specifically says in C of that section, a commercial mobile radio service provider. And we're not even a commercial radio service provider, so it even takes us further away from those definitions. It also goes on in the next section, Section 14, to define telecommunication facility. It includes real estate, easements, apparatus, property, and routes used and operated to provide two-way telecommunication service to the public for hire within this state. So what we are discussing tonight is the sale of pieces and parts of equipment that can only be used to broadcast and receive 800 megahertz spectrum. This spectrum is specifically set aside by the Federal Communications Commission for exclusive use by local, regional, and state public safety agencies. It is not available to the public nor the commercial sector, and it does not impact our ability to offer telecommunication services. So I just wanted to underscore that point to address any confusion regarding the ordinance itself. So let's get to the agenda. So what we're going to talk about is an update since November 1st, since we last talked and gave the informational item, our path forward that we're recommending, a schedule for that to happen, and our staff recommendation to get there. It's probably important to go back and go through just a little bit of the history that we learned back then of the steps that have gotten us here, because I think it's important for the transition across again from body to body to be able to kind of follow that. So for the most recent history, in 2022, the Alachua County Commission and the City of Gainesville agreed to enter into discussions to establish acceptable terms to sell the existing public safety radio system from Grucom to Alachua County. On June 22nd of 23, the City of Gainesville approved the interlocal agreement between Alachua County and the City of Gainesville for the acquisition of the trunked radio system, which was a preliminary step to negotiating a purchase sale agreement to execute the transaction. Then on September 26th and September 28th, both commissions respectively agreed to extend that interlocal agreement until December 31st of 2023. And that was to provide staff additional time to finalize the sale agreement and present the issue to this board. So just wanted to note there that it's really kind of crossed over. It's had a long history, and it's kind of gone through different decision-making authorities at that time. The timing is important to move an agreement to completion. I emphasized that last time, as the county has instructed their staff, county commissions have instructed their staff, if we can't get to an agreement, to go ahead and start building their own system. So with that, that's kind of the update. I can tell you today that we have, Chief Theus and I spoke this afternoon, and we have completed an agreement. We've still got to go back and read through, but we believe that we are down to a clean document. I certainly don't trust his commas and periods, so we're going to have to go check all those. But we do have after a lot of hard work, there is a agreeable agreement that we'll be giving to you here shortly. I know that you've got a copy of one that's very close to what that is, so we can talk about what's included in that as we go forward, okay? So, as I said, we've finalized all outstanding contract issues. The county commission's going to get that same update on the 14th. So that is another timeline that we need to keep an eye on. If you remember from the first presentation, there were a number of reasons that the sale could fit into some longer-term goals for GRU and achieve some of GRUCOM's financial goals. I'd kind of like to go back and refresh those because I think it's important for us to keep sight of that. First of all, it gains significant payment against debt for us. It allows us to support the continued use of this really important system too, right? It's got to stay stable because public safety is a priority for all of us. It will stabilize city expenses and potentially lower longer-term costs for all of us. Cash from the sale goes directly against GRUCOM's debt, amortized over time. We get to retain revenue from providing tower leasing and communication services to the county. And importantly, it allows GRUCOM to focus on our core telecommunications products and services. Now, we've achieved that. The approved offer is $8 million against $10.4 million in debt for the inventory and assets. This $8 million is required to go towards GRUCOM debt in this agreement, and the schedule of payments is even included in the attachments from our Chief Financial Officer. Alachua County agreed that payments from all users will remain fixed for 5 years. The city's payments for service are currently and will be for the first 2 years, $937,000 about that for the city, and $164,000 for GRU. That's what we have paid this past year as well. The city's payments will move to $750,000 in years 3, 4, and 5, and that'll provide them with a savings of around $563,000 over that term. GRUCOM will retain about $300,000 plus in annual revenue based on what's in this agreement. Now we'll get to the path forward for executing the sale. As I started the presentation, I mentioned how this negotiation has produced agreements that have spanned from City Commission support for the effort across the passing of House Bill 1645 and now under the oversight of the authority. Based on that timeline of transition and some language in the House bill, the county understandably is looking for additional assurance that the sale is supported across the span of the transition of oversight from the commission to the authority. Several ideas were discussed among the group, and a path forward was agreed by the parties that provides that additional assurance. So the slide outlines the path requested today. The county did request more assurances with House Bill. The best path forward that we determined was for the authority, if you agree, and county to sign the purchase and sale agreement. So that is for the purchase and sale. And then the county and the city to have a separate agreement and a estoppel agreement. And an estoppel agreement, I can explain that a little bit further, but only to a certain degree. That's why we have Bianca and Dan here if need be. So let's talk about why this path was chosen and what it effectively accomplishes. So this is a read the slide moment. It provides consistency with the city charter to do all things necessary to effectuate the orderly transition of management, operation, and control of the utility system, utilities from the city to the authority. It recognizes these past interlocal agreements that were agreed to at different steps throughout this process between the city and the county related to both parties' commitment to making that sale. It references the TRS purchase agreement between GRU and the county separately. And then it acts as a waiver, and this is the important part, to prevent the city from making any claims or taking actions related to the validity of the purchase agreement between GRUA and the county. So it effectively is a promise by the city not to interfere with that sale for the most part. Okay. So what does that look like going forward? So today we are asking you to effectively approve the sale. There are fundamentals that we've talked about in the informational item. You've seen now a copy of the agreement. It was almost done. It is now complete. You can certainly make that complete. But we're just looking to take action further to be able to approve that sale. And why? Because we've got a timeline here that's got us a little pressure packed too. So the county commission would be the next step on December 12th to approve the sale contingent on the estoppel agreement. Then next, the thought would be that the city commission would approve the estoppel agreement on December 14th. And that would allow for staff to prepare for closing by the end of the year, which is December 31st. On or before the 29th is what we're shooting for. So those are a couple of things that we are looking for. It gets wrapped up in the recommendation. So with the presentation complete, staff is looking for approval of the following recommendations. 1, GRUA authorize the GRUA chair and general manager or designees to execute the purchase and sale agreement of the public safety radio system to Alachua County, subject to approval by the city attorney as to form and legality. Next, consistent with the city charter, to do all things necessary to effectuate an orderly transition of management, operation, and control of the utilities from the city to the authority, GRUA authorize the city attorney to request city commission to enter into an estoppel agreement with the county. The estoppel agreement has been provided as part of the backup and attachments and exhibits in the agreement as well. So with that, that finishes my presentation. If there's any questions.
Well, do we have a motion on the floor? Do you have questions before a motion, anybody? Okay, do we have a motion on the floor?
I move that we accept staff's recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion to accept staff's recommendation. We have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Okay, citizen comment, please.
Mr. Chair, Jim Conish. I'm curious, we're paying $8 million you're being paid $8 million, GRU's being paid $8 million by the county for something with $10.3 million in debt. So is that debt a revenue bond? Is that debt secured by the monies taking in? And I have some vague recollection that what triggered this was GRU increased its fees by 400% because they had been asked to keep upgrading it, and the fees they were charging were not keeping up with the expenses of the upgrades. And the reason I'm bringing this up, this is public safety, and I'm not trying to interfere with it. But this is just another example. This is not a business. Like Keith Perry calls it a piggy bank. It's a piñata. You're destroying it to get every last drop of revenue and equity out of it, and you're left with a roadkill. And this is why I'm bringing this up. This is not isolated. This is one from one end of the organization to another, and the ratepayers out here are feeling it. The hospital gentleman is in partnership with Joe Cerulli at the co-ed club that I see you at. $63,000 in July of 22, $2,000 a day. His bill is probably millions. And we're not making any headway on the debt. And we're paying through the nose. So we can't just talk about what we need to do. We need to do it, and fast.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody else like to talk about the motion on the floor? Seeing none. Back to the board. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
There we have it.
Mr. Chair, the next item is 2023-1151, discussion of the general manager CEO position at GRU.
Okay, what I'd like to do at this point, unless anybody has any objections, because the purpose of this is to examine what we want to do. If we want to go forward, we want to look at other options. So if nobody objects, I'd like to give the CEO a moment to open the discussion. Is that okay with everybody?
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So as you all are well aware, and kind of pointing to what the chair just mentioned, in July 1st, a new law was passed and enacted That law put this board into place, and one of the responsibilities of this board is to appoint a CEO GM. And so what the law clearly states is that the existing general manager will be the sitting CEO GM until that happens, and the board can choose to select the sitting general manager or someone else as the CEO GM going forward. And so I want to just make a few comments about where we are and ultimately make a recommendation to the board, and then be available to answer questions or have a discussion about the path forward. So first, we all have had this discussion about, we have a common goal of GRU moving forward in a very healthy manner. Doing that is not about only one person, although this role is critical and important for the utility. It is about the 850 employees that we have. It is about the over 200,000 people that we provide services to in our community. And it is about this authority and their role as we go forward into the future. And so we have a responsibility to continue to provide service and reliable service well into the future, in addition to addressing some of the challenges we've said. So one of the things, when the bill was passed, and staff, we began looking at what does this mean? What is the direction of the utility? One thing that was clear to us, and I think that's been reinforced for you all as board members coming on, is that we really want to transform the utility into being run more like a business enterprise. And so we need to go through a transformation to do that as an organization. So the question is really, what is the best way to do that? Who are the best personnel to do that? And so I contend that I think the current leadership of GRU, me in the role of the CEO GM, can best work both with the board, with you all coming in, and align the mission and goals of you with the organization and drive that transformation down through the utility, through ultimately employees. And so what I want to propose tonight is we are really refocusing our leadership team and the utility toward three main business drivers. Those three main business drivers is one, applying business principles to achieve financial success. And so really looking down through the organization and how do we change views, mindsets, outlook, so that we're moving more toward a business mindset. And I really think that what that will do is lead to lower debt, which is what we've all talked about, as well as streamlining operations. And so applying those principles and doing that. Two is we all know that is only done through the employees. And so we have to focus on improving the employee culture. We have to change the culture of the organization, to change that mindset, to change that outlook, to be more efficient, more productive, and move the organization toward that business transformation. I think that will reward the employees with the ability to be innovative, to be thoughtful, and have a growth mindset. Get out of maybe a stagnant view of the way that we've always done things and move toward a new model going forward. Third, and maybe this should be number one, is I think we all recognize the importance of building trust with our customers. Our reputation has changed over time as GRU, and I think we all want a transformation of how we're viewed in the community, and we do that through building trust with our customers, and one of the primary aspects of that is having competitive rates. And I will say, when you look at our utility, our rates are competitive, except for our electric rates. Our electric rates are high. They're usually one of the highest in the state, depending on where fuel adjustment is and all of that. And that is something we are laser focused on, the importance of bringing that down and making that more competitive in the industry. So I think that will ultimately restore the reputation of GRU in our community and with the customers and the people we serve. So I think these goals are not only in the best interest of our customers, but it's also the long-term utility health. So driving towards this will move the utility toward a healthier financial standing and a future that we can be proud of moving into beyond just the next couple of years or even decades. With that, what I want to go to is I have a handout available that really is focusing on some short-term immediate actions that we as a leadership team and all the employees at GRU are implementing now as part of the fiscal year work plan and fiscal year '24 work plan and budget. And so I want to just walk through, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I want to just talk through a little bit, a few high level. On the left is the three business drivers I just kind of laid out: applying business principles, improving work culture, and building customer trust. And then what we have are different strategic objectives that lead to actions, that then we have metrics and targets that we're attempting to meet over the course of this next year and into the future to meet those. And so I'm going to point out a few ones we're all familiar with, and I think we're going to continue to hear more as the year goes on. One is productivity across our organization. That's really the transforming into a more of a business mindset for all of our employees, at what they do on a daily basis, looking at more efficient ways to do their jobs. Two, under financial strength, we talked about these, reducing net debt. As Member Caro mentioned, we have a strong foundation for a net debt reduction plan. It's one of the most aggressive things we've had in my time at GRU, but can we do more? I think is the question. And so we are looking at putting these business principles in place, changing the way we do our work to see if we can make that a more aggressive plan going forward. Stabilizing electric rates. I think we want to look at stabilizing all our rates, but a real strong focus on our electric rates. What can we do looking forward regarding our rates, and in a way that we can stabilize that, yet still support the debt reduction plan and the financial metrics we're trying to achieve over the next decade. And then the next thing is really increasing net revenues. Are there things that we can do different to be more aggressive to increase our net revenues in our organization? Employee safety, you cannot overstate employee safety. We run an organization that is potentially hazardous, and that is both for employees and our public. So we can never lose sight of anything we do. We have to have the overarching employee safety as everything we do and how we operate. And so we have metrics that look at industry standards and rates of different injuries or accidents that really give us a guide to see how we're doing. And we have very aggressive goals related to those. Workforce management, as I mentioned about workforce culture, we can talk all we want and we can strategize all we want about changes and changing the organization. It is only going to happen if that transforms the way each individual works every day. And so we are focused on what can we do to drive that change in the organization. A couple of examples of things to look at that have been brought up in our workforce is also HR. So we talked about interaction with general government. HR services are provided through general government. Last year we put in place a service level agreement. First time we've ever had it. It has very clear metrics of what they need to achieve for us as the customer. We are tracking that now monthly. And so we will keep an eye on that as we go forward and make sure that we're getting those services and the value that we're paying for. Second thing is, a lot of things have become apparent over time as we've come along, the board has come in. One of those things is our policies for our employees need to be different than the employees for the rest of the city. We have to have GRU-specific policies. In operating more like a business, we need different policies of how we work with our employees to do that. So we are now kind of going through the process of identifying what are those changes in policies we need to operate more efficiently as an organization. Value to customer. We talked about this a couple times. February 7th, what we're going to bring to you is a recommendation on the MOUs and SLAs and the relationship we have with general government. We're going to bring a recommendation of what things to stop, what things to continue there, or something different. We're going to look at the value that's provided, the service that's provided, and to see if that's something we want to continue or do in a different manner. So that will be part of the budget process and part of what we bring forward. The last thing I just want to touch on is infrastructure reliability. So the three letters IRP are short little letters, but I will tell you as a board member, those stand for Integrated Resource Plan. It's one of the most significant things you will do in the next 6 months. The reason for that is it is really laying out how are we going to provide power to our community in the next 25 years. Those decisions drive what the next piece of generation be, or where we will buy that power from. And so those are big decisions that'll have long-lasting impacts on rates and our customers. And so that is something we'll be bringing to you. So what I'm proposing is this is the action plan, this is what we're on. But we, in the business transformation, we need to do more. We need to have a new business plan for GRU. What I would like to do is have us go through a process that's parallel to the budget process where we're developing that business plan together in alignment with the board and the leadership team at GRU and ultimately all the employees. As we go through the budget process, we will develop a business plan that we will then drive to that business plan, and the budget will be linked to it of how to pay for that business plan. So a couple of things real quick. One, that business plan will redefine our core mission and vision of the utility. So sometimes people think of mission and vision statements as lofty things. I think it's really critical that we are aligned, the board and us and our employees are aligned on what our mission is. So starting next week on the 14th, we will bring forth recommendations of how to change that mission and vision of GRU and looking for input from the board. Next is our strategic objectives. So the page I looked at, it is a lot of our major strategic objectives going forward. We want to make sure that we're aligned again, that the board is helping to drive our business going forward. We will bring recommendations, but ultimately we'll be looking for affirmation or changing of what those strategic objectives are. That will begin next week on the 14th as well, of what some of that direction is. Then evaluating our market and identifying opportunities for the future. We don't want to be stagnant and just thinking this is all we are. We also want to be careful that we want to focus on our core abilities and what our strengths are. But we want to do the market analysis to see, are there opportunities for us as a business to change, to grow, to be different, and maybe different than we've ever thought of before, or have different relationships with large customers than we've had before. And I really think the board gives us the authority, gives us that opportunity to expand into maybe some different areas. But again, making sure we're focused on what our core strengths are. Next is really confirming the level of service we provide and our operational goals. And so what I really mean by that is how level of service we provide, our reliability in our systems, what we meet, that drives costs. That drives the costs in the organization. And so it's really important that we're on the same page and aligned on what is the level of services we're trying to achieve. And then that will drive our operational goals going forward. And then lastly, that all kind of wraps into the financial plan for the utility and how we stay on our debt reduction plan and trying to meet all of these goals through this business transformation. So the implementation of that plan will really look to optimize our operations, reduce overheads, and ultimately make our services competitive in the industry. That transition is not going to be fast, but it is important that we lay out what that road is and how we transition in order to have lasting change in the years and decades to come. So I think the question for you all, as I lay out that plan and strategy going forward, is am I the right person to do that? And that is a question you have to ask. I will just say I think that we have demonstrated, and our leadership team has demonstrated over the last 2 years, several things that give results to that. And I'm just going to lay out a few, and we talked about a few of these already in the meeting. But one, over the last couple of years, we had to kind of navigate out of the end of the pandemic. That had a pretty significant impact on us as an organization. You had supply chain issues, you had labor scarcity, and we were able to kind of navigate out of that and continue to maintain our level of service and what we provide to our customer. Two, we had a little bit of discussion about the fuel levelization balance. So the balance was significantly negative, and natural gas prices skyrocketed 3 to 4 times more than they had been historically. That was a major impact on our customers and drove that fuel levelization balance down. Man, I am happy to report, and it is one of the best things, news in the last year, is that we've been able to drive that out of the negative. It is no longer negative. That balance is positive, and it's positive to the point when we've been able to reduce the fuel adjustments several times to bring it back down more into a reasonable area. And again, that fuel adjustment is a direct cost on the customer's bill, and we've been able to bring that back down. That is a direct impact on lowering their bill. Next, and we talked about this earlier, last year we were able to make a massive adjustment in the government services contribution or general fund transfer. From the fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24, that was a $19 million reduction. In addition to that, we identified cost reductions in the utility last year that are now implemented in this fiscal year. The combination of those two things is a savings of about $147 million for customers that we have dedicated 100% to debt reduction and reducing that. So that has been something we now have in place, and as we've talked about, that's a plan that I think is a good foundation, that we are there ways to build from that foundation and make that more aggressive. I'm gonna hit a couple more real quick. People may have a different opinion of this. When the bill was passed and became law, our leadership team focused, how do we do this successfully? How do we transition to a new authority? I think we have done that. There are parts of it that we wish we could go faster and get on board, but I think we have successfully transitioned to the authority. And now we have hit the ground running. We are making changes and actions, and we really have a plan forward with the business transformation of the organization. One of the things that you'll learn probably coming into next year is storm season is a major impact on us as an organization. We have been able to build from the past successes and really build an emergency response team and infrastructure that is ready to respond and bring in other mutual aid or help other utilities as part of that response. And we've led that organization through, the organization through 2 storm seasons these last 2 years. Last 2 things I'll mention is just the advanced metering infrastructure. We are implementing a advanced metering infrastructure for our customers that is really transformational for them, of providing data and information to better help them understand how they use all of the different utility service, or particularly water, gas, and electricity. And that is in place, and by January of 2025, we anticipate that most of the meters will be in place and operational, and data will be available for our customers. Last thing I'll say is looping back around to the fuel adjustment. If you look at a bill, 1,000 kilowatt hour bill in December of last year, compared to 1,000 kilowatt hour bill this December, it is $37 less. That is a significant reduction for our customers, and we're glad that we've been able to do that, and the markets have changed that allowed us to do that. So we understand, we understand the importance of affordability. And affordability is a difficult thing to define. We understand the importance of that, and particularly with our electric system. And so we are committed to a plan. We know there is not something we can do really quickly, but we're committed to go on a path toward affordability, particularly in our electric system, and move that forward. So all of that said, I again think that I am the right person to go through this process and to transform the utility, and to go through get it to where we're transforming it through each of the employees. I've been in town here about 33 years, went to school, was a consulting engineer, and have been here at GRU for 22 years. I think my record has been in the public most of that time of being a person of integrity, competency, and have successes. I can continue to leverage that with our team going forward. And so I have a recommendation. Obviously, I'm gonna stop talking here in a second, and you all can have a discussion and ask questions. My recommendation is this. I think the best path forward at this time would be to continue to have me serve in the role of CEO GM, implement this business plan transformation, put in place, have metrics to measure me by, and you hold me accountable at the end of next year. And so that would be my recommendation, and I'm all in to do that, and I believe I can do that well. So I'll turn it over to you all, and if you have questions or want to discuss it.
Okay, just real quick before I turn it to the board, I do want to recognize something here real quick. Through this transition, I cannot imagine what our 840 employees are doing. They have to be wondering what's going on. We have one employee, that is you. That's the only one we can hire, fire, quite frankly, hold accountable and direct as a board, not individually. So I do respect how awkward this is. This doesn't happen in normal life, and I hope, your family's not sitting at home watching this, and I know you got to be a little nervous. So I just want to say, for me, I respect what you're going through right now and how tense this is. but this is our job. So at that point, I'm gonna look to the board and see if anybody has anything they would like to say.
I have a presentation prepared with two staff members.
Okay?
And this is, 30 days ago, I requested a variety of items to be put on the agenda. This was one of those.
Okay.
So I have created booklets, if you guys can pass these down, but please don't open them until the actual presentation. Thank you.
You know I peak at Christmas.
It will just ruin the surprise.
How far down do we go? All the way?
Please, yes.
Okay.
Can I please have Mr. Banks and Ms. Resnick, please? To come sit up here at the table.
I started opening. I knew I'd cheat.
Please don't open.
I stopped.
Craig
I
Carter,
stopped.
Chair. So I have a variety of questions, but before I get started with these questions, Tony, I just want to say that this is going to be one of the most difficult things I've ever done. This is not easy for me, and I just want to put voice to that. And you and I have had a previous conversation that this is something that has to be done. And so, here we go. How long have you been the GM of GRU?
For almost 2 years.
When you accepted the position, were you made aware of GRU's debt?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I was aware before that, yes.
Are you aware that the debt has gone up since you become the
Yes,
general manager?
yes.
Okay. Would you agree that GRU is seriously one of the most incredibly complex businesses in this community?
Yes, it's very complex. Yes, sir.
Would you agree that one of the duties of the GM of GRU is to work on behalf of the ratepayer to ensure quality services and experiences?
Absolutely.
All right. Would you agree that GRU is one of the most diverse and highly educated workforces in the state?
I believe so, to the best of my knowledge. Yeah.
What is the highest level of education that you had when you were made GM of GRU?
Bachelor's degree.
So you have a bachelor's degree.
Yep.
How many college business courses have you taken when you became the GM of GRU?
After I became the GM,
At the point where you were given the position?
I can't quantify it, but I took numerous courses going through college at UF.
Business courses or courses?
I mean, there were courses that had business aspect to it. I went through the
Okay.
College of Engineering, and that has business aspect.
Okay, so you took some basic business courses. How many business accounting classes have you taken before you became GM?
No specific business accounting
No,
classes.
okay. If you can open up the very first page, this is actually it's a copy of the job description from the city of Gainesville. And I highlighted one piece and it says a master's degree in business administration is preferred. Now, it does give a variety of other things. You can have a bachelor's degree from accredited university and you have to have some experience. But I just want to point out that even the city of Gainesville simply states that they prefer the person that holds that position to hold a master's in business. Would you agree to that statement? That's what the job description that the city has.
Yeah, I mean, I think it states that a bachelor's degree from accredited university in business administration, finance, or engineering.
Right.
10 years of progressively responsible management experience goes on.
Do you have, previous to becoming the general manager, did you have electrical generation experience or just wastewater?
I did not have electrical generation
thank you.
experience specifically, but I worked on a leadership team at GRU for I
Thank
think
you.
7 or 8 years.
At the time that you were made GM of GRU, would it surprise you if I said that there were more than 14 internal candidates that had more experience in higher education than you?
I'm unaware. I wouldn't.
Well, it's actually more than 14, but I figured 14 was a nice number. Based on your qualifications, why do you think that you were chosen for general manager of GRU?
I think some of the things I stated earlier, my ability to really work with a leadership team. So we have a leadership team that has a CPA as our CFO. We have a CIO, 2 people you brought up that have experience. We have folks on the team that have a depth of experience in generation in different aspects of the operating of the utility, just like we have a city attorney that has access. So I think primarily my ability to work with different experts on a team and to develop a collaborative path forward for an organization.
We'll get back to that one. Thank you. On November 15th at 5:40 or 5:54 PM during the workshop, I asked you if higher labor dollars equal higher rates. Do you remember this question in this conversation we had? Your answer, you agreed with the statement. But I don't know if we need to go back to the minutes, but.
Yeah, so labor dollars are a major expense
Right.
as a utility.
And higher labor dollars equal higher rates potentially, or they affect
Potentially,
the rates?
it could, yeah. It depends on what your revenues are in a given year, but it could absolutely
If we flip the
any
yellow,
increase cost
if
could
we
have
flip
an
the yellow tab, everybody who's involved in this, that has a book. I requested on 10/10 a report of labor dollars. And you have been the GM for quite some time. Were you aware that since you become the general manager, that the labor dollars have actually increased $5.1 million?
Yeah, I mean, I'm agree with this.
Okay, great, thank you. On 11/13/23, 7:45 AM, I emailed you request copies of the SLAs between GRU and the city of Gainesville. Did you ever supply those to me? Because I never saw them. was
I'm
2 weeks
not
ago.
sure.
Yeah.
I would have to check.
Well, I can
thought
tell
that-
you didn't, but I was able
Apologize for that.
to get my hands on those. On 11/15 during the workshop at 5:12 PM, I asked if the SLAs benefited the ratepayers, and you said yes. Do you agree with this statement?
I don't know if I would say it benefits the ratepayers. So the SLAs identify a service level agreement between GRU and
Right.
general government. So
And I believe my exact question was, have we maximized those so that we're making sure we get a good deal?
Right, and I think the answer would be, that's what we're evaluating
Gotcha,
now.
okay.
So on February 7th, we're gonna come back with recommendations on if we have the value, if we should continue, if we should get those services in a different manner.
Okay. If everyone can turn to the SLA agreement, just flip the orange, it's right there. So this is an example of one of the things that I actually requested but didn't receive from you, Mr. Cunningham. This is the official copy of the Enterprise for the Information Technology. Does this look familiar to you?
Yes.
Okay, great. Can you do me a favor and turn to page 3? And there's a highlighted section. Can you tell me when this agreement took effect?
I think that's accurate, yeah. Beginning of so we were trying to finish
So
it up.
October 1st of 2023,
Right,
this specific service level agreement got put in place. We were in place as well during that time. Or we were put in place
Right.
shortly after, but the law was already passed. Let's go to the next page on this one. So basically, if we go to page 22 on that service level agreement, I circled something there, and actually, you know what, I'm sorry to do this to you guys. I skipped one. I really needed Tony to read this one little thing here. Page 4, no need for anyone else. Page 4, can you read the highlighted paragraph for me?
you're
It's-
asking me to read it, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you don't mind. It's highlighted.
Oh, yeah. The designated review owner or document owner is responsible for facilitating quarterly reviews of this document with the general manager of utilities, the city manager, and the enterprise IT chief information officer.
Okay, so we have 3 people that have to approve this and work on it. City manager, you, and the chief information technology officer, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so now we get to go to page 22. This is the fun part, ladies and gentlemen. So I circled that. Can you tell me, is Mr. Banks, the chief information officer's signature on this agreement?
No.
No, okay. Can you flip the page and there's what they call the history, or with the document history. Can you point out where Mr. Banks was part of that process?
It's not in this signature. Mr. Banks created this document. He was the creator of the document, and then the city manager and the general manager were the signatories on the document.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
So-
who's Mr. Banks?
This is Mr. Banks. He's we'll get to him in just a second. He's gonna be a wealth of information for us. So let's just ask Mr. Banks. Mr. Banks, thank you so much for sitting up here. I know this isn't easy. I'm hoping that we can rectify the situation. If everyone can flip to the red section. Mr. Banks, can you identify what this document is?
The draft copy of the service level agreement.
Okay. Can you please share why your name isn't on the final agreement?
I asked my staff member to take my name off of it.
Why is that?
I didn't necessarily agree on the way that the city had come about the financial compensation for services, nor the actual the way they derived, the way they received services. I thought that there was a huge discrepancy, and frankly, I thought that there was a better way to do it.
Okay. Is it true that the GRU IT department services more than 67 City of Gainesville locations and roughly 9 to 11 GRU locations?
Roughly, yes.
Okay, so it's a fair statement. On page 22, can you go ahead and everyone flip to page 22? I have some.
Just move this.
Oh, sorry about that.
No,
I
I
have
was just trying to help.
some figures circled there. Physical year 23, 24. Your recommendation through this process is that we should be billing the city of Gainesville $5.9 million per year. Is that correct?
That was our proposal, correct?
That was the proposal. Can you tell me why that isn't the case for fiscal year 23, 24, and 25? To the tune of, it's been discounted almost $9 million to the city of Gainesville? Is that why your signature's not on this? Because it's not correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Were you instructed by the general manager, Tony Cunningham, to hide this information from the GRU Authority Board and the public, or to not discuss it?
I've never met with you gentlemen, so I can't really speak to that, if that makes sense. I can tell you that I had concerns and expressed those concerns.
You had concerns. What were your concerns?
That due to our financial condition, I'm not the financial person, but I thought that we were giving away a lot of monies that we were collecting for services that were delivered.
And you went to Mr. Cunningham and expressed this, and what we have is you wanted a part of it, so you took your signature off of it because it's not accurate. Is that correct?
Yes.
To the best of your knowledge, are there any other areas inside GRU that Mr. Cunningham is exhibiting similar malfeasant or inappropriate behavior that is non-beneficial to the ratepayers of GRU?
I don't have that kind of exposure, but like I said, I think that I agree with some of the statements, some of the things, the trail we're blazing here is just going along very slowly, and I don't think that was, and again, this is just my opinion, I don't think that was the intent. But again, I'm just the CIO, and
Which is a very important position, Mr. Banks. I just want to be very clear that you're the chief
Yes.
of the IT department, so you kind of know what you're doing.
Yes.
Has your department and/or career been threatened by Mr. Cunningham if you didn't comply or buy into the narrative with the present SLA?
At times, there were statements made about the 2.9, and if the city walked, that we would have to reduce accordingly. And I felt like at times there were things that made me feel very uncomfortable about not only my position, but a service department that provided a lot of services.
Is, in your opinion, Mr. Cunningham the leader that GRU needs right now to fix these issues?
It's hard for me to answer that question. Like I said, I'm gonna say it like this. It's my intent that we should do better, and I don't know, like I said, it's difficult for me sitting right across from Tony, because, you know, I personally like him, but I don't know if I don't know if I'm qualified to even answer that question. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Mr. Chair, can I respond to some of that, or?
I will give you, you
Yeah.
will, this is not a
I'm trying
blind.
to, what I'm trying to do is, you know, I'm trying to let the member, you know, get his questions. You know, we're not in the court of law here by any means,
No,
but.
we're not.
But I'm just trying to, let him get it through his system, you know, and go through, and then I'm sure he's gonna give everybody a time to respond.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Mr. Banks, in regard to treatment or just overall? Has your work environment has it been fun for you to come to work recently?
No, I've had health-related issues, not directly caused by any person, but it's the scenario, the situation. Like I said, my concerns, and I believe that the leadership team has the same concerns. We built a really critical technology service delivery system. And for us to do anything to jeopardize our ability to provide these services, both the city and GRU has become accustomed to, I think is, you know, it's difficult. You know, I haven't had a lot of fun, because I've had to evaluate a lot of these things going forward. I've been asked to do, to take a look at certain things. What would happen to money if you lost $2.9 million? It's a huge hit, even to a $20 million budget. To lose $6 million, the full evaluated number would be devastating. You're talking about probably half the staff at that point. And yeah, I don't know.
Mr. Banks, I just personally, as a person sitting up here, want to say that I apologize for the behavior that you've experienced. It's not appropriate, it's not correct, and you shouldn't have a variety of these things done. And I apologize if anything comes out of this. Just understand that someone understands what it's like to work in a hostile environment. So thank you. I appreciate that.
I just want to say that one last thing. I just want to make it clear, like I said, some of the things I said up here are uncomfortable for me. And I just want to make sure that, you know, I don't receive any backlash from that, because like I said, I've told people, and I'm from the Northeast, please forgive me, I use a lot of anecdotes and colloquialisms. I guess my saying is all the time, you know, if I'm not a person likes to be a person that wants to argue about right or wrong or integrity or not. If it's not right, you know, I vote with my feet. I don't wait around. I don't want to talk a lot about it. I just want either action to be taken, and we don't have to agree. We can agree to disagree, and I'm not the kind of person that goes off the handle. But ownership is key in that. And like I said, I don't, you know, and I don't want to set a bad precedent, because anybody that speaks out against anything or any situation or institution, I don't think that they should, you know, have the kind of fears that I have and I've had for quite some time, if that makes sense.
That's horrible to hear, that we have someone that's a leadership in this company, this utility, that's afraid. That's horrible. Absolutely horrible, Mr. Cunningham.
Can you ask him what he's afraid of? Because
I have a family.
no, I mean, are you afraid he's gonna fire you for speaking up?
Anytime you speak and you have a disagreement, and again, and I've always said to Tony, hey, look, you know, Tony, you're the general manager. We may have a disagreement, and at the end of the day, if you tell me to do X, Y, and Z, that's what we're gonna do, right? But it's still, and like I said, I'm not a person that's, you know, advertising, ooh, but I wanted to be clear that there's certain things, especially in this condition, and we all know that, hey, GRU had financial issues. I thought in this occasion, speaking only to this, and it's documented, it's not like Walt's coming here making up stuff. I thought we could have negotiated to benefit GRU better. And I think that, and I gave examples, just like the TRS system. The TRS system is a system that can't fail. And if everybody understands what I mean by that, you have to, public safety. Well, we have a tie into that. GPD uses our phones, they use our network connections, all that kind of stuff. If I was to get a notification that the city somehow wanted to cancel a contract tomorrow, or I got direction from the general manager to cancel the contract tomorrow, I could not ethically cut them off because there's public safety involved. And it goes both ways. Now, again, the fact that there was original language in here about discounting the services as I was instructed to do, by the financial arm, when that was removed, I didn't get a good taste in my mouth at that point, if that makes sense.
Well, I appreciate that. Do you feel that he's gonna fire you? Or are you in fear that is that your fear? You said you're fearful. And I respect that you have a family, and I said earlier, his position being up here, you sitting right there, I wouldn't change the spot with you for anything right now.
Right.
It's very uncomfortable, I respect that. Are you in fear of getting fired?
Like I said, from the Northeast, payback.
Okay.
It would be something
You
that I
said-
would look.
Okay.
Is within.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Banks, I appreciate it. Claudia, can you please remind everyone of your title here, GRU?
Thank you. A Chief Financial Officer.
Have you experienced and seen similar behaviors from Mr. Cunningham that have been described here today?
So we've talked about the IT SLA and the change in the numbers and a reduction in the payment that general government is going to pay for fiscal year 2024. From this particular one, my recollection of this, there were some discussions about the discount attached to it, so there are some emails going back and forth. I didn't know that this had been signed until August, I think. And now that you're talking about it, all right, first off, I'm being put on the spot here, so please bear with me because it's very uncomfortable.
Can imagine.
Yeah, so when you look at something like this and you're looking at HB 1645, SLA-related losses are supposed to be included in the flow of funds in the budget process. So I will tell you that this loss is not included in the flow of funds for the budget process for 2024. So as of right now, I've got serious concerns about that. So, because that impacts my area, and so I'll have to kind of think that through. For, I guess overall, we also had, recently, and I'm sure the board is aware of this, some conversations about the bond delay. It was brought up tonight. So that's, it's another specific instance.
I'll get to that. I have
Right.
specific questions on
But
it.
no one has asked me any questions about
I got
that.
you. I got
But,
you.
yeah, so this right here is an issue in our budget right now. So if this was discounted, and I'm looking at both documents, our FY '24 budget is an issue because that budget is in place under the new authority that has HB 1645 attached to it.
So
if
you're
that makes sense.
you're the CFO
Yes.
of GRU, and you were not made aware of the final agreement between the city and the numbers associated in this SLA.
So the numbers that I saw, I worked with IT to put together the 5.9 million. We
Right.
went back and forth for several months, right? So what that looks like. And this 5.9 million is based upon Microsoft licenses, if I remember correctly. It splits it between licenses. It makes sense. It's consistent. You can repeat it. I'm going off memory. When I received the final IT SLA, I believe it was in August, and it was signed with an effective date of 10/1. And it does have that differential, the 5.9 to the 2.9.
So, have you been told or been shunned to not engage the board specifically on basic topics, or have you been stepped on when you try to make presentations by Mr. Cunningham?
Okay, so this is very uncomfortable. So I've had some conversations with the general manager, the executive team. For October 4th, we had kind of the, meet and greet, kind of get things going kind of thing. You are a new authority who are being tasked to look at, I'm just being real, so tasked with looking at base rates, the general fund transfer, and making decisions on a much quicker basis than you are now. So in my professional opinion and what I've seen of what's happened over the past 6 months, this board isn't being given financial information enough to actually make that decision. Now, that's for me from a professional perspective, right? Because if I was a board member, I'd want to start to make decisions because that's why you're here. You're here because there are financial issues at the utility. We've got base rate issues going on, but we are not making decisions, and I'm not providing enough information to make for you to make those decisions. And those are the conversations that we've had internally, probably quite spirited, that we need to start to get this information flowing through. So we are meeting 4, and we're still doing options. And so when I say that, to answer your question, I do feel like I haven't been able to give you that information that you need to do that. And I'm sorry that was a long answer, but
No,
I
it's
just wanted to
fine.
walk that through.
Since you brought it up, everyone can flip to the very last one. So we've heard a lot about this memo. What we're looking at is the May 11th of 2023. This is a memo. Can you, I'll do it. On March, there's a highlighted section for everyone. It says on March 15th, 2023, GRU was directed by Mayor Ward to hold the request for approval for the debt issuance until after the state legislative session. Did you write this memo?
Yes, I did.
Is this memo accurate and true?
So in my professional opinion, yes.
Okay. What was the purpose of this memo?
So there was a series of events, and again, I'm going off memory. So there was and much of this has been reported in the news media as well, because I did receive public records requests for some of this information. So there was a meeting on March 15th in which we were talking about the general fund transfer, the discussion of the upcoming bond transactions that we needed to bring to the commission came up. And that original timeline, we were supposed to bring 4 transactions to the commission on April 6th. And so during the discussion, the one transaction with new money was asked to be pulled. In my professional opinion, it was asked to be pulled by the mayor. And the impetus, in my professional opinion, was to issue new debt while we were under the specter of JLAC would not have been seen very well, because you're issuing new debt in the middle of trying to deal with a debt problem. So from my perspective, we need cash in order to fund the capital infrastructure. I've said that multiple times. So holding that new money has downstream impacts. You can't fund the infrastructure. You have cash issues in some of the systems, which occurred, I believe, in electric and water. But during that meeting, I clearly stated that this was going to cost more. And that's easy enough to see because interest rates were rising. So the more you push it out, the more it's going to cost our customers. I did not know at the time how much, right? You have to deal with that later. So after JLAC, I think on the October meeting, said that they were going to come in and complete some sort of investigative review, I spent some time kind of going back through the timeline. During the meeting on March 15th, I emailed our financial advisor that we were directed to hold that deal. I told PFM that we were to hold that deal and we needed to reset our timeline at that point. And so that started the time frame. And I will tell you that when we complete presentations for board members or commission members, we're very prescribed with it. So when we showed the original presentation to the original commissioners, we talked about this. This is me, my opinion, and we said that we were directed to hold the deal. And you've read all this in the paper, of course. They were directed to hold the deal, and we told every single commissioner this. And that presentation that we met with each and every commissioner had the new money in it when we met in March. When that presentation went to the commission in April, the new money was out because we were told to pull it out. We obviously didn't issue until June, and we didn't know, of course, at the time how much it was going to cost. but it was 2.9 million. So 2.9 million over 3 years.
So the bond delay that this memo is discussing cost $2.9 million, is that correct?
At this point in time in May, let me think about this.
We weren't aware of the figure, but is it true that this bond delay cost GRU and the ratepayers $2.9 million?
It is going to cost, yes.
Okay, great.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the mayor said to you, let's hold off, or let's not issue that, and did the general manager at that time, CEO, participate in that conversation?
So I've notated in some other document, but I think the words were no new debt. And
And he knew the consequences, because you said you pointed out the consequences if we waited to be more expensive.
right, there would be increased interest cost. So when JLAC was going to come in, I'm not sure what's happening with that, but when they were coming in, I went through every single presentation. And so we do a lot of these, right?
Right.
So in April, the presentation that was shown to the commission had the new debt in it. When we actually provided the presentation to the commission on April 6th, my accounting and finance director was asked to add language, no new debt, in that presentation to point out that there was no new debt in that presentation. So there's a combination of events that happen behind the scenes. I will tell you, and I've had this conversation with the general manager as well, holding one transaction is very unusual, right? You usually do them all at once, you get them done. It's efficient, you already have the cost lined up, the bank's lined up. So I don't know if that answers your question. And again, I want to say this again, I am extremely uncomfortable over here.
And I apologize. I'm,
This is
and quite frankly, I guess, if you don't want to answer, I mean, that's your choice. And I'm trying to give a board member a little bit of background here.
I'm almost done.
I will answer the questions because in my professional opinion, that's what I'm supposed to do, is to give my opinion, the results, and answer the questions as truthfully and as accurately as I can. So thank you.
Are you concerned for your job, similar to Mr. Banks, based on today?
I would say after today,
Okay.
this is going to be, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. My apologies, and thank you so much for doing this. Mr. Cunningham, you've heard a variety of things today, and I have just a few more questions, and then we get to go from there. Did you have a conversation with Mayor Ward where he instructed you to delay the bond process utility costing at $2.9 million, or did you make the decision on your own?
Yeah, so we had, what we're referencing there is a meeting we had in the general manager's office. There were about 7 people in the room. And again, as the CFO mentioned, as Claudia said, we're coming off of JLAC. The Joint Legislative Auditing Committee is, basically directing us, telling us, hey, y'all got to address this. I think as the general manager, the city manager, the mayor, and all the staff, we were in that meeting to start to talk about how are we going to proceed forward.
Okay, my question though was, and this is a yes or no question.
Yeah.
So were you directed by Mayor Ward, or did you make the decision yourself?
So ultimately, I made the decision myself. The mayor gave his opinion. An individual commissioner, just like an individual board member, cannot direct me.
I
And
understand
so
that.
it only can act as a board. So the mayor gave a suggestion, recommendation, his thoughts. Ultimately, I had to make a decision. And I'll get some context around that decision. And so we came out of JLAC with, you need a debt reduction plan. You need to, the utility has too much debt. You need a debt reduction plan that's aggressive and bold. We're coming to, right after that, shortly after that, we need to issue more debt. We need to have that, we talked about earlier, the debt went up. So we were faced with a situation of coming out of JLAC, and our first major action with the city commission is to increase debt further. And so I did not think that was appropriate to do that. I didn't think that was the time to do that, that we needed to get in place what our plan forward is before we do that.
I understand that, but you even admitted at JLAC that the two are not related. When Crusoe asked you, you finally, after 3 or 4 times, said, well, they're not related. So back to my original question, did you, yes or no, have a conversation with Mayor Ward?
Yes,
where
we
you
had
were
a
instructed.
group meeting where he expressed his opinion and thought on that.
Right.
Me as an individual cannot be directed, so did not feel like I was directed by the mayor, and that it was ultimately my decision to take that forward at the time or develop a debt reduction plan and a path forward prior to issuing more debt. One of the things we were considering was, do we issue debt at all, and what would be the impact of that? That was something to consider. If we were in a very short timeline, though, of if we're gonna issue this debt, we've got to issue it. And then, as you said earlier, there was Barclays was unwilling to participate with us until July 1st, and other banks were willing to participate before July 1st. So again, we had to make a decision: are we going to try to move forward and issue this debt? And so then we ultimately did that in June.
So in closing, then I'll hand the floor over so you can answer, because you got a lot thrown at you today.
Yeah.
So what I've established through data is that Mr. Cunningham doesn't possess the education to run this utility. That is backed by those of us who have run large businesses. You do not create a top-heavy company and increase labor dollars when you're severely in debt, which you admitted the utility at the point where you were given the GM position over a lot of qualified people, some of which are sitting at the table and in this room. You chose to create a top-heavy organization and allow the city commission to engage in rate increases to make up for the money that you, as the general manager, are giving them in SLA agreements. This is not appropriate. This is not the evidence of someone who has a business education. You cut expenses. You don't add a bunch of chiefs. I do not have the confidence in you to be the general manager here based off the data and the fact that you've increased debt, you've increased payroll, you've created a hostile work environment for two people. And what's most interesting is that when Mr. Belarski was put on the stand for his termination, and I would like to remind you, because he wasn't a good fit, hundreds of people showed up. Where are they at? Everyone knew that the discussion about your employment was today. I've only had time in 60 days to dig into one of the 30-plus touch points that the city has. There's a reason that the governor chose me to dig into this stuff, because I have a different vision of the way that numbers come together. What I see is that someone doesn't have the education, is creating a hostile work environment, is continuing to give money to the city to the tune of one agreement is $9 million, benefits the city of Gainesville, that took effect when we were all here. And you got confusion as to who made the decision. Great, let me ask you this question. Are you allowed to make the decision?
Yes.
I disagree, buddy. Because what it did is it put on every single person in this community, your decisions as a business leader for this utility has negatively impacted every single ratepayer. I now will give you an opportunity to speak.
I want to give, she was asking for the floor for a second. So for clarification, I'm assuming.
Yes, absolutely. So anytime we're talking about a financial transaction, we obviously have our counterparties, banks and investors, et cetera, that are watching what's happening here. So the timeline of the bond delay versus the debt reduction plan, I'm gonna put some dates out there. So March 15th, the delay was decided upon, wherever that lands. April 6th, we went to the commission to have the other transactions approved. April 13th was the approval of the net debt reduction plan itself by the commission. So we could have put the new debt onto this calendar on that same day, right, as the net debt reduction plan, or at any one of the subsequent meetings. There's no reason to wait until June, other than, in my professional opinion, because that's what I heard, was to hold it till after the legislative session ended. There were multiple meetings that this could have gone to the commission for approval for the new debt. Thank
So
you for letting me
Can
speak.
I add one piece to that? There was one additional city commission action that happened on May 4th, was the resolution for the new general government services contribution. So that piece is the major aspect of the debt reduction plan, and that was approved on May 4th. So April 13th, we had a debt reduction plan that included the government services contribution reduction, but we had to come back and get a resolution approved on May 4th, and then we brought the debt issuance on in June. So can I please start working my way through some of these? I would appreciate that.
Look, here's the challenge that I have, but here's the challenge that I have, Tony, is you have done an amazing job at steering this board. Your presentations are canned. I've called you on it many times. You steer conversations. You step on Claudia every time she goes to tell the truth. The issue that I have with you is that I don't trust anything you're saying based on the fact that it's in data, it's in writing. You're giving money to the city, and you're now going to make up a variety of excuses, and you got people leaving the room because they're uncomfortable because they think you're gonna fire them tomorrow if my motion to terminate you doesn't go through. We owe it to this community, Tony, to reduce rates, and all you've done is increase debt and increase rates.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and bring it back to the chair. Go ahead and respond.
So I got to try to work my way back through. So a couple of things is I am not aware that I have created a hostile environment at all, and I don't think I have at all. I've never heard that feedback from Mr. Banks of what was expressed today. And so I'm unaware of that, and I firmly don't believe I have created any sort of hostile environment. I would also like to assure both Ms. Rasnick and Mr. Banks, there is nothing to worry about tomorrow if I'm still the CEO GM. I will still work with them in a respectful and professional manner. So a couple of things, talking about the SLA for IT services. So I want to make something real clear. So we've been providing IT services to general government for 12, 13 years, something in that neighborhood. We've collected around $1 million per year to get those services. What we were attempting to do with the SLA is capture more of those dollars than what we had been. So in 2023, we were capturing $1.4 million. We had a series of meetings with general government about the methodology of how to allocate expenses. And so we have an IT department that's servicing the whole city. Part of that is GRU, part of that is general government, and requirements are different in different parts of the organization. We were using a proxy to try to allocate those expenses, and the proxy we used were Microsoft licenses. So much more complicated, IT services than Microsoft licenses, but it was a way to allocate those expenses. When you use that methodology, you come up with a number of 5.9 million. Keep in mind, we've been charging 1.4 or less for a decade. And so what the city manager and I try to do is, our first recommendation, just like Walt said, hey, this allocation methodology, 5.9. They come back, and again, over the course of months, we go back and forth over what that dollar figure should be. At the end of the day, what we were trying to get in place is get this SLA done and put in place for 1 year. And then from that year, we're gonna try to figure out, do we wanna move away from them and not provide them service anymore? Or continue to provide service, renegotiate the amount going forward. So the business decision I was faced with at that point is, do we take 2.9 million, which is double what we were getting from general government for those services, or do we walk away and say, go get your own services? I worked with Mr. Banks about, hey, if we walk away, are we gonna save this amount of money? And the answer was no. If we walk away, we have economies of scales, we'll be able to reduce expenses some but we won't be able to reduce them enough to make up that difference in revenue. And so I was faced with a business decision: do we walk away and we're basically gonna end up worse financially, or do we sign an agreement for 1 year for the $3 million or $2.9 million for that 1 year, and then move into the next year with either negotiating more or us walking away at that point? It was a wise business decision. We had more revenue, twice as much revenue than we had in the last decade. And it was, in my opinion, the right thing to do going forward. So I just want to lay out that with the IT services, using our allocation method different than theirs, 5.9, and I do think that was a sound approach. But I was faced with a business decision on whether to move forward with that or not. So I do want to lay that out. Two is, in terms of the hostile environment, I will say, frankly, I'm very confused about that. Mr. Banks and I talk on a regular basis. We meet on a regular basis. I recently did his annual review, and it was a positive review, and gave him very positive feedback on his role. That's documented as well. So I'm confused by that perspective, that that his job might be at risk, or that is a hostile work environment. I will add, look, man, this year has been a high-stress year for me and for everyone, a lot of the leadership team and other people in the organization. This change has been challenging. We have a lot of unknowns and uncertainties. We do work in an environment that is high stress, but we also are in roles that we have to make difficult decisions. And so I had worked with Mr. Banks about, if we're going to walk away from general government and not provide them IT services, we have to make up that $2.9 million for our customers. Otherwise, our customers are taking on more expense. And so far, we've been unable to identify a way to reduce that $2.9 million. And so again, leads to the business decision of why we continue to provide the services. So I think on IT, the idea of, there was a word used, malfeasance. I have no lack of confidence that I did nothing that would be considered malfeasance at all. Again, it was a business decision that was actually better for the customer at the end of the day than not. So I think, I don't know, are there other questions about IT? I wanted to hit all of those.
Yeah, I do have some. I'm writing my notes. So I'm sitting here listening, and I hear your methodology. Hey, it's a bird in the hand. Let's get down the road.
Yep.
But I'm also, through this whole process, I would love to know if the city ever gave any concessions, because it just seems like I'm going all the way back to the biomass plant. The GRU is always the one giving the concessions. Okay, yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it. And I guess maybe the city knows that. So, no disrespect, but as a businessman, I'd look cities dead in the eye and say, start packing your bags and pull the ace out of the card deck, because where are they going to go? It's sort of the trunk radio. We know if the county builds their own, we're screwed. Well, let the city think about what it would look like to build. So that concerns me.
Yeah. So,
I respect you're looking at it in the rearview mirror and say, it's more than 1 million. But it just seems like, we gave a concession, the streetlights, and I'm sitting there listening to this, and it seems like I would love to sit down with the city now and say, what did you concede on?
right. So let me address it, Mr. Chair. I mean, so we did go from 1.4 million to 2.9 million. So I think that was better for GRU. Again, I think it simply comes down to, if we say go pack your bags, we now have $2.9 million in revenue that goes away, and we're unable to reduce expenses by 2.9 million. So our customers are now taking on a greater burden.
So I would need an explanation, because I thought the scenario was licensing.
No, that was the proxy used to allocate the expenses. That's not the expense. The Microsoft licenses was used, like, how many licenses do they have? How many licenses do we have?
So that's how you did okay.
Correct, that's just a proxy.
I thought it was the physical number also, but
no.
okay, I apologize. Okay.
And so, so it came down to that decision. With that, we used that methodology, came to 5.9 million. They were unwilling to do that at the time. We were trying to work through. So what we said was, let's do this 3 million, and then we're going to reevaluate, because really what I want to figure out is, can we reduce $3 million worth of expenses and have them go walk and figure out IT a different way, and then we're just focused on the utility, and we don't have a IT department that is servicing the whole city. And so that was the decision and the path forward. Again, this is happening over several months of, things changing, but yeah, that was ultimately the decision there. And again, going back to the hostile, totally caught by surprise. I've worked well with Mr. Banks for the past, I think, 7 or 8 years. Never had any challenges. I've never sat in my office and thought about how to terminate him. That has never been a thought in my brain. He is the leader of that organization and does a really good job leading, has a good leadership team. So I have supported him and continue to support him in his role.
But I want to remind you that he took his name off the documents because he wasn't comfortable. That is a physical fact.
Yeah.
Just to be completely clear.
Yeah. Understood. In terms of, we were having the discussion about the debt, I think.
Hold, I noticed you didn't bring up Ms. Resnick's name.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about.
Okay, I apologize.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that,
Yeah,
okay.
so again, Claudia and I, the CFO, we have worked together over the last 7 or 8 years, and I think we often challenge each other. I think together we're able to produce good products because we often have different perspectives, but then we work together to find solutions. In terms of some of the discussion about how do we bring information to the board, I have had numerous conversations with Ms. Rasnick about what information do we bring and how do we present it to be most useful for you as board members. So, we've provided financial statements and budgets and as much information as possible. During meetings, what we're attempting to do is try to give you as much boiled down information that can be used to figure out, hey, here's the key takeaway, here's what's important in this information, so that there's not an overwhelming amount of data that is clouding decisions, but at the same time, having backup information. If you notice in a lot of presentations, the appendix has a lot more information, so that if you want to dig deeper, if you want to look at that, in depth, you can do that. But the presentation, what we're attempting to do is try to boil that down for you as members of what the important takeaways are. And so she and I have had many discussions, and with the whole executive team, many discussions about how do we best present information, provide information, and when do we do that? I will say one of the challenges of this transition is you all were named just right before your first meeting. And so Claudia and I had discussions about, do we come to that meeting? And she had some presentations where we just throw out everything at the meeting and we talk about debt and we talk about where we are as an organization. Do we do that 4 days after you're named to be on the board? And we wrestled with that as an executive team of how do we onboard, how do we orient you as new authority members? I did not feel comfortable if we come to the first meeting with you being a week into this and say, we're gonna raise rates or lower rates, or we're gonna change the GSC without giving you an opportunity to have that information and the ability to understand the organization before bringing major decisions. And so, yeah, that is definitely part of what my leadership brought, was that we have to bring you all along and give you the opportunity to learn the business, learn the organization before we bring those major decisions. But we've wrestled with that in the months leading up and then as we started. And what we did in the workshop on the 15th is what we really did is say, okay, we're ready to accelerate this now. And we're gonna have every 2 weeks have these meetings and be able to drive us toward decision making. So I just wanted to hit that piece. And again, I've worked with Ms. Rasnick over the last many years, especially close to the last 2 years. And I think that together we produce really good decisions and content and information for us to drive the business forward. I oftentimes follow her lead. To your point, Member Coates, She's a CPA. She's very knowledgeable. Man, I trust her. I want to follow her wisdom and with that as well as with her staff and other external support that we have as an organization of how we manage our debt and how we make our decisions. Going back to the debt issuance, again, this was a very challenging time. We go to the Joint Legislative Auditing Committee. They focus us, the state auditor Auditor General focuses us on two items that we were well aware of, and those two items being debt and the GFT, and says, you need a methodology for the GFT and you need to reduce your debt. So we worked really hard coming out of that to develop a plan to do both of those. And that plan we were able to bring before the commission on April 13th and then come back and adopt the resolution on the GSC on May 4th. Those were critical things that we had to get in place, in my opinion, and as my role before we issue more debt. Again, the COO and I had discussions about what would happen if we don't issue debt. Like, what would happen if we don't do this? What would that mean to our capital improvement plan? And is that the better path forward? We decided we needed to continue to invest in our infrastructure because we were unsure of what the next couple of years looked like. And so I made the decision ultimately for us to not issue it in April when we didn't have a plan, and to get the April approval, the May approval, and then bring it back in June for the issuance. I don't know how we would do that any different if we had to redo it, because we had to get where we were going and what we were doing in place before we did that.
Question. So you said you do respect her and you do listen to her.
Absolutely.
So did she suggest holding off on the debt or issuing the debt altogether?
No. I mean, we came out of that meeting with her hearing that we were directed to do that. And so we moved forward meeting and moved forward with the process of doing that.
But I believe she still said that it should be issued.
I don't even know, I don't remember having that specific conversation after the March 15th.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause I heard her say that and, a couple of times. So that's what I was saying. And, quite frankly, here it goes, and I could look at this table and around the room. If there's a business decision, if I tell somebody to do something and it's contrary to a good business decision, I'll stand up and argue it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, I understand what you told me to do. You don't understand the position we're in.
Yep.
And you're going to cost us money by doing this. I'm confident to do this.
Yeah.
Screw you. I'm running a business.
Right.
I've done that a few times. And that's business. So I'm thinking out loud as I'm hearing stuff, so.
So I'd like to close this out. And Mr. Cunningham, you did exactly what I thought you would do, which is you painted a picture, but the facts simply state that you have two of your senior staff that you said you don't know what the issue is. They're not lying. They clearly are well-respected. They're not making this up. So someone isn't being accurate. And if you couple it with your lack of experience that you have in the business arena, and you couple it with the fact that you've made a lot of bad business decisions by continuing to give the city additional capital, I hereby move that we terminate your employment effective immediately.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Okay, the motion will die for lack of second.
Oh, I'm not gonna pitch a fit like I did 30 days ago.
Just checking. Yeah, I don't know. I just, gotta look to my left now and then, so, okay.
Chairman Carly,
Pardon me?
will you take comments?
Well, I take comments on a non-motion.
I think you need,
I will say this. I will look at the board and, I'm not gonna make that decision on my own, because my decision is to stick firm with what I said to Mr., excuse me, Mr. Conish, that it's not an action. We attempted to take an action, then there would have been a motion. So what is the flavor of the board?
I mean, she's a staff member. I'm for it. Because it may reveal that the issues that I brought up, and I just want to be clear that I brought up a lot of issues since the first meeting, and all you guys have agreed with me a week later. So I just want to be completely clear on that. I would like to hear what she has to say.
Does that go for all staff members?
Well, I'm trying to get the consensus of the board.
I think you're gonna have to put parameters on it if we do this.
Yep. So, I'm also I believe, in favor of hearing from the staff at this point. And, I'm not sure
That's
how you.
fine. That's
Okay, so I would say it will be a 3-minute situation.
That's fine.
Just as, and I imagine everybody got uncomfortable tonight. Okay, I respect that. So let's try to be respectful. And so the staff and the citizens will also have 3 minutes. We will cap it at a 30-minute conversation total, just like in the initial. Okay?
Okay.
So please proceed.
Chair Carter, my name is Jean Clark, and I am the IT manager for Enterprise Services. Our group is the service desk, the operations team, and the Center of Excellence, which supports our financial system. I have worked at GRU for 22 plus years. I have known Mr. Cunningham for all of those years. My concern is on my CIO. The man has come to us approximately 8 years ago when I was about to leave the IT department to go to another area because I was not happy with the way we were doing things. About the same time, we took on general government's infrastructure. To separate infrastructures at this point would be very difficult and very long in a process. But Mr. Banks has taken us from an IT department to an enterprise IT department, meaning we now have cybersecurity. So our citizens' data is secure. We now can fulfill public records requests in the time frame that we do. We have security. When we went into COVID, if it wasn't for Mr. Banks and his forethought in 2019 getting us to the cloud, we would not have been able to continue as a business. Mr. Banks has taken us from IT to an enterprise IT. When we signed that MOU in 10 years ago, 10 years ago, we were an IT department. That was before Mr. Banks came along. We did not have a cybersecurity department. We did not have a project management office. We did not have enough staff to cover it. General government's network was like a piece of Swiss cheese. Everything was open unless there was something bad. Ours was everything was closed because we wanted to protect our data. We had to take that and make it stronger. And we've done that in the last 10 years. And it's all because of that gentleman back there. I am coming up to you, and I know I've got 22 years in, so I can retire tomorrow, and I would if he was leaving.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And also, just to assure something, I think all the employees have the right to say something, and for this board member, I will defend your right. Whether it's positive or negative, you have the right to speak, so.
One other thing, you have been to all the other business units.
Yes, ma'am.
You have not been to IT
I
to see
did when I
what
was
we
the city
do.
commissioner back in the old days. So, yes, ma'am, I'll make it a point. Next speaker, please.
My name is Robin Baxley. I've had the distinct pleasure of working with Tony for my entire 17 years at GRU. To sit in that chair over there and hear what sounds to me like we're in a court of law, to hear that Tony is not trustworthy, I'm going to be frank, it makes me very angry. Tony is the most upstanding, honest person that I've ever had the pleasure to work with. I watched him come in here when he was appointed. He didn't know ahead of time that the commission was going to ask him to do this. I watched that man spend literally 18, 19, 20 hours a day studying, trying to get up to speed. He had to have back surgery. He studied and worked from his bed after he had back surgery. He may not have the degree that you all feel he needs, but he is exceedingly intelligent. He's a fair person. He did work to make a collaborative group of his officers. And he has not made the utility top-heavy. These people were all here before Tony was the CEO. He didn't hire any of them. I take that back. He did appoint Brett or hire Mr. Goodman into a position that already existed. It was just vacant. So I'm leaving. I'm retiring in 3 weeks, maybe 2. So I don't feel like I have anything to lose. And I know Ed is here tonight, and I was also Ed's assistant. I'm one of the hundreds of people that went and supported him. I did that because this utility has been ground up, and we've been spun and spun and spun, and there's been no stability over these last 10, 15 years. And we need that. We need stability. And I didn't want them to get rid of Ed because it was another turning. I sense, and I'm sorry, Ed, but I sense regret supporting him because after he left, he went out and became a naysayer and went on a campaign to drag GRU and its employees through the mud. So I regret supporting him. I can't see a situation where I would ever regret supporting Tony. Is he perfect? No, he's not, but he is a man of integrity and intelligence. I know I'm out of time.
And I
So,
appreciate it. I'm gonna, thank you, ma'am.
yeah.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, please.
So Brett Goodman, Chief Operating Officer at GRU. And I want to segue what Robin said is, so Tony did hire me. I filled into a role. Guess what his directive to me was? How do we undo what Ed did with the overhead on the Chiefs? So I've been working really diligently on how to unwind that. It's going to take some time. And I've got some witnesses here that I've started laying out that plan. So if you don't like overhead, he's the one that's trying to address it. Ed came in and man, he swallowed it up. We added an entire layer of organization on top of an already pretty well-running organization. And it's going to take years to unwind that. And so I have made it my directive to figure out how we get back to a low overhead, operationally efficient organization. And that has been my directive. That's the only reason I stepped into the COO role. I've continued, and I've had meetings with many of our employees on, I'm not sure I understand the need for this role or this overhead, and we are working through that plan. And you need to give this man a chance. The other thing I want to clarify today is we cherry-picked a couple answers on that debt reduction plan. And Ms. Rasnick is correct, is from a purely financial perspective, yes, that's the right decision to do. But from an operational perspective, not to have that $3.5 million debt reduction plan in place and then to go out for more money without the GSE, you're going to cost GRU employees jobs. You put them at risk. I'm telling you, you want a business decision? I don't want to jeopardize our most valuable resource, and that is our employees. And that's what we were about to do before we got our plan in place. And you will not convince me otherwise. I advised him, look, I would not go forward and go get another credit card until you know how the plan that you need, and that would jeopardize our employees. I just cannot believe that somebody would say there is no other reason that you would put that debt on the April 15th commission without the GSC being approved. It absolutely put our employees at risk. I'll spend that $2.9 million every single day for our 850 employees. That was the tough decision he had to make. He knew he was going to get criticism from the financial world, but operationally, it was absolutely the right decision. So thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. Rick Hutton, Gainesville Regional Utilities. I'm a supervising engineer in our sustainability group. I am a professional engineer. I've been for about 30 years. I've been with GRU the last 20 years. I've worked with Mr. Cunningham that whole time in various capacities. I will assure you that he is of the highest integrity. You can ask people in the business community, anybody that's worked with him before, he truly is. And so I'll have to say I'm pretty shocked at what's occurred tonight. What I feel like is a pretty well-scripted, contrived, feels like a trial. And frankly, I'm kind of shocked. That really is not befitting of Mr. Cunningham, and really surprised about that. If there's an accusation of a hostile work environment, that I've never witnessed that with Mr. Cunningham in all kinds of situations, never witnessed that before. If you really think that that's a possibility, you need to ask other folks too. I just don't believe it. I have a problem with that. The other thing, I'll echo some of the things that Robin said too, that you know, we as employees, one of the things that's made me want to stay at GRU for 20 years, which I didn't necessarily think I was going to do that when I came here 20 years ago, is the level of dedication that I see with our employees that want to serve our customers. We've been through the ringer politically, and I'm still amazed, though, that when you interact with our employees, people are really dedicated to serving our community. So more churn is not good for us. More politics is not good for us. What we really need is some stability. Need to get to work. I think having Mr. Cunningham at the helm with you all, reviewing our operations, it sounds like we would be on a path to really thoroughly review things, take some time to do it. We're a very complex organization. I think you all hopefully have seen that from the tours and things that you've been on. So I don't see your job as coming in and let's make 50 decisions right away and you know, it's going to be good. I think you really need to spend some time, work with Mr. Cunningham to do that, review our operations. I'm actually very optimistic that, that we'll have some good results from that. But I do not think that pushing him out and trying to bring somebody else in new is the right thing to do for GRU or our community, our customers. Thank you.
I appreciate that, sir. Next speaker, please.
I promised myself that I wouldn't become somebody that came and spoke at the lectern. You know, when I was finished my time, I wanted to be a listener and I wanted to hear what was going on and maybe be an old sage to folks. I'll tell you, Tony, when I heard what you were going through tonight, I had to leave the room because I've been in your situation. Tomorrow will be 6 years since I was put on trial. It was December 7th, 2017. You're lucky that the board gave you an opportunity to talk. I was never given that type of opportunity. I went through 4 of those events, and on the 4th time, they did fire me. But I did want to get up and speak to something that one of your supporters said about me, and I appreciate the loyalty that he showed to you. But I didn't layer on debt. If you look at the numbers, and you can go to Ms. Rasnick and look at those numbers, I added a few chiefs, took them out of positions that we already had, and actually drove expenses down for the organization. Somebody at the board was asking, when did the debt reduction plan begin? I think it was you, Mr. Caro, Member Caro. It began when I sold or bought out the biomass plant. That was debt reduction plan number 1. That saved $300 million. So when we said in 2017 our debt went up, BS, sorry, it didn't. That PPA was capitalized as a lease for $1.1 billion. We bought it for $750 million. You all can't ignore that. So I wanted to set the record straight in those regards. There are other things that I heard throughout the evening, but you have a job to do. And the one good thing I heard about what's happening tonight was you recognize the power that House Bill 1645 gives you. So you must challenge Tony. You must challenge the things that you hear, because you have the power. You have to look at your legal representation. You have to look at the things that you can do, because you need to cut expenses, and you really need to look at that strategic plan, because that's not a transformational plan. A transformational plan is deciding whether you want to be in the generation business any longer. You entered into a solar PPA that it doesn't make sense. We were told the ACE study was going to be topped at 80. That didn't include, okay, I'm going to run out of time.
Sorry about that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Mr. Chair, Jim Conish. We never talk about your marching orders, which is HB 1645. Need doesn't understand it, doesn't like it, doesn't want to talk about it. Section 1 says, Section 3.06 of Article 3 of Section 1 of Chapter 90.394 is repealed. On July 1st, Tony Cunningham, his position disappeared. At that point, the city commission cannot fire him because he's no longer a charter officer. He could only be fired by the city manager. He sat up there with the nameplate general manager, even though he really didn't even belong in the dais. And he put forth a budget that ignored 1645, that's full of considerations relating to political, social, and ideological interests which were prohibited. He put forth a budget and he said he's going to do better next year. We're bleeding this year. He had no authority to put forth the budget. He did it to appease the city commissioners, who was convinced by Nee that Nee's going to have Judge Dempsey not only invalidate 1645, but Mr. Nee sued the Secretary of State, asking her to expunge 1645 from the records, which had never been done. That's the level of arrogance and contempt. He sued the Attorney General and the governor and didn't even have standing to do it, and they were immune from suit. It was a stunt. We can't afford this. We can't afford this. That this is a sham. He had no authority to lower the fuel adjustment charge. You'd have to do what you did with the liquidity facilities. You have to authorize them because all of his authority is gone except over HR. That utility attorney over there, supposed to be working for Cunningham, not Nee. It's clearly in here. Everyone working for GRU has to be under Cunningham. They don't care because they're ignoring the charter. And if you don't enforce it, if you don't enforce this charter, then we're without a charter. We're in no man's land. It's not a matter of who we like, who's a nice person, who's lived here for how many years or worked here for so many years. This is the marching orders. You do not have independent legal counsel. It's not even discussed anymore. The folly of Nee as attorney is laid bare by this controversy. Nee is not representing the authority. He's representing the city commissioners, who are the real problem,
Sorry, sir.
not Cunningham.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This next speaker, please.
So, Anthony, you've always been good to me. But at the same time, we never know what goes on behind closed doors. People who are abused don't necessarily come out with it. The two people that came forward tonight, they have obvious reasons to feel like something might happen to their jobs. I don't know what those reasons are, and none of us may know what those reasons are. But the problem is they do feel like something could happen. And I will let you know, I will fight for every single employee of GRU if they feel like they have a problem. It's not just the customers now, it's the employees. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
I'm Debbie Martinez. It's no secret that GRU is hemorrhaging money. And the best I can give you is my nursing analogy. Some of the worst surgeons I ever worked with in surgery had the best bedside manner. So nice doesn't equate competency. I believe, and I hope that many of you believe this, that we need an expert who has a proven record of fixing financially broken utilities like ours. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Mr. Chair, board members, Christine Kunkel, also your clerk. I serve in the general manager's office. I've been with the utility for 6.5 years, and I'd love to address some of the things that were shared tonight. I'd like to believe that all of you, your desire to be on this board is to improve our utility. Well, that's why Tony's here. Tony, from day one, has stated that he was put into this position and he cares more for this utility than I would say I've seen in most people that work here at the utility. He loves it. He could tell you all about it. You see the sticker on his bottle. I mean, he really does. And I believe that's sincere and has really motivated me all the more to want to do my job well. Second, I'd like to take ownership for the lack of response for your inquiry with the SLA. I actually have an email in my inbox November 15th that Tony sent to me. That was my responsibility. And I am in a new position, and unfortunately, that was something that I have dropped the ball, and I had made some inquiries, made movement, and then never followed up and actually intended to respond to you, Vice Chair Coates. So that's on me. And I would like to add, if the board ever fails to receive a response in the future, please contact me and we'll assure that we can get that done. Unfortunately, sometimes it can be overwhelming and things can slip through the cracks, which I'm sure you all understand, having served in very prominent positions or continuing to serve in prominent positions. Additionally, there have been comments made about whether Tony is equipped for the job. As has already been stated, first of all, there was never a proper search done for this position because he was appointed. And as such, he did everything he could, as Robin stated earlier, to equip himself to be brought up to speed. And he is continuing to do that and often relies heavily upon those that report to him for their knowledge in order to make good decisions, although I know that's being debated tonight. However, even so, sometimes people disagree and may not always have the same conclusion. Additionally, I know that there was some comments made about wanting to provide more education regarding financial things, and certainly that is very important. But I will say, especially as a person who schedules all your meetings, it's actually quite difficult to make meetings for you all because you're very busy yourselves. And so certainly we're trying to bring you up to speed, but that does take time, and it might be slower than folks may think that would be necessary, but I can assure you we're working as fast as possible to get things on the calendar. Additionally, I do want to affirm what's already been shared about morale. This is my second time standing up here defending one of my bosses, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do that for Tony, and I did it for Ed for different reasons. And I will say, as already has been said, neither one is the perfect CEO because frankly, I don't believe there is a perfect CEO. But I do believe that he cares very deeply about this organization, just as I believed Ed did as well. And I will say that a lot of folks would have been here had they known that we would be at this place in time right now. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please.
Real quick, Commissioners, Tom Canilio, I'm not a former employee, but I really hope that you saw my email I sent you a couple of days ago. I want to compliment you for keeping Tony, and the main reason is that I just finished reading Ed Bolarski's book, and I really encourage everyone to get a copy because, you know, Ed got fired. And I don't want to see another general manager get fired. And the reason is there's not a mention made in Ed Bolarski's book of Tony Cunningham in a negative or positive way. I looked, I've read it, and it's really well written. Tony, Ed, congratulations. Everyone should have this book to find out why the city that lost control. It's there.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Bob Tuning. I'm a GRU customer, but I don't live in the city. I'm not an employee of GRU. This is a perfect example why this board was created. It had to be taken away from the politicians. GRU had to be taken away. The good news is my neighbors and peers of mine sleep far better at night because you're here. Thank you very much for taking on this tremendous responsibility. I do have a rhetorical question, kind of directed towards Mr. Cunningham. He talked about IRPs, reliability of the system. Isn't the fiscal solvency of GRU part of that reliability? Obviously it is. GRU was taken to the brink of the cliff. That wasn't sustainable. So here we are. And whether Mr. Cunningham stays as the general manager or not, that's up to you guys. But this is a tremendous responsibility for you board members to have to make that decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Do we have another speaker? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the board for comments. Anything from you two gentlemen?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard a number of comments again tonight about council.
Yep.
And I think we need to make a decision on council.
It's on my list, sir.
Okay, well, and
No, I mean, I agree with you.
and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to do it, but we need to do it.
I was going to go under member comment because it's not on the agenda.
Okay.
And in all fairness, Mr. Cunningham and I have had this discussion several times. We've had, Mr. Cunningham has had this discussion with Mr. Arnett. We do understand that. And I don't want to take your time. I'm sorry. You finish it.
No,
speak.
I mean, I just.
I can get on a roll. You gotta be careful.
Sure. Well, I mean, I just want to, once again, talk about the urgency of it. I mean, from my perspective, looking at the electric side, we have contracts that need to be reviewed and looked at. And our esteemed counsel over there, as great as he is going to be wearing two hats. And I don't think that's appropriate. And I think we need to appoint a council, and if it's an interim council, that's fine, but we need to appoint a council and have some people start to work on some critical issues.
Yes, sir.
So,
I agree.
can I respond now, or want to wait till member
Let's
comment?
just wait for a second. Let's, because I think that's going to be a discussion of member comment. Why don't we wait for that? So I made it, just support, not support. I made it clear to Tony, our first meeting. I looked him dead in the eye. I said, "You are a guy." I didn't have the power to move him, fire him, or anything. He says, "I'm your guy." I said, "Are you 100%? Because if you're not our guy, I need to know now. If you're our guy, we're going forward. But there's no going back. You will never be, in my opinion, a GRU employee again." I think I've asked you that 4 more times.
Yes.
Have I not?
You have?
Okay. I was very candid with Tony that I would love to have a fixer, a CEO that could come in and fix everything. I agree with some of the comments. I don't believe there's the perfect CEO, no disrespect. No disrespect to everybody at this board. But I also feel that we can't pull too many levers at once. And I think that can sink a ship. So last meeting, when we brought this up, I asked one thing of this board. I said, if we put his job on the line and it's time for him to go, we all look at him and say, "It's been nice working with you." If he stays, I ask this board to pick up the flags and get behind him, in my opinion. I also will say, if there's any employee out there, my cell phone is probably the easiest thing to find. this is where this attorney's gonna get nervous. I'll be happy to sit down with you. I sat down as a city commissioner, employees walked into my office. If there's an employee out there that feels they're being targeted by any executive in this thing, I'll take the consequences, but I'll sit down with you and investigate it. There is no place in this organization for employees to do that. When I took this position, I told my wife we had two jobs. One, good service. Man, we got that. I will put this staff, these employees, the men and women on this team against anybody in this state, bar none. Next thing was reasonable rates. Well, they got me there because that's really subjective. We got high rates in electric. So I thought our job to be easy. We had one problem to solve. And that's what I've been focusing on. Me personally, I've been focusing on debt reduction. I've been making a lot of stupid phone calls. I've been really trying to work on that because we are at least triple over what we should be in debt. Ms. Raznick and I have been talking, and she has graciously said she'll sit down with me someday and bring me up to even more speed. And I do agree we need more information. I have a 3-year head start on you guys, okay? And I don't feel confident right now that I could have a rate discussion, to be honest with you. I would have to listen to what you said. I'd have to verify what you said. So I just want to let everybody know at the end of the day, I have questioned Tony's business decisions. When I hear something like, I take her advice, but I went this direction, I need to know why. I'm also a poker player. I think I might have went all in with the city. I got to be honest with you. What frustrates me is that it seems that GRU is making the concessions time and time again. And that concerns me. And if you're going to be our guy, I would like you to have a black eye or two.
I'm good with that.
Okay, and I mean it. So I am putting my support behind you. Because that's what I ask all these board members to do. And they don't have to by any means. I am gonna put my support behind you because we didn't get a second tonight. If we would have got a second tonight, I would have shaken your hand and had lunch with you tomorrow like I told you I would. Okay, so going forward, I think there needs to be a time limit. I think there needs to be some thresholds and some benchmarks that you need to achieve. If you don't achieve those, I expect you to resign.
Okay.
I don't expect to go through this again. That's my statement, and I think 1 year is a very good time frame. So that's the end of my statement. Do you have anything else to say, or?
No.
No, I'm just checking.
I got my book right
I
here.
looked here, and I just want to look to the left. Okay, I think you're a good man. Okay, so we are moving on from that. Our next item will be member comment. Sir.
Can I just make a few comments?
Oh, yes,
So
sir.
I've spent the
I
last
apologize. I thought
2
I-
months meeting with our leadership team and with Tony. I feel like, at least what I've learned to this point, is that the debt reduction plan as designated is a good starting point. I think that his staff and he are very professional and experts at what they do. We have certainly, I think, all agreed that there still remains a lot of financial improvement opportunities up and down the P&L and across the balance sheet as well. And so there's still a lot of work to do. But we also have to be careful with how we work with the bond markets and how we work with the evaluators. But ultimately, I think we're going to go in the right direction. I think the IRP is very important in some of those long-term decisions. And certainly in this next budget process, that is where we're going to flesh out a lot of some of the SLAs and some of those things. So I too give my support to Tony, but I do agree with you that, let's establish what are our goals for the next year, and then we'll revisit that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I support you as well.
Okay. Okay, oops. Member comment. I'll let anybody that has a comment go first, but I do have a few things on my list here, and attorney is one of them. So if you.
That was my main comment.
I do have one. Mr. Nick, can you share with everyone what the city commission instructed you to do tomorrow in regard to an ordinance against GRU stepping foot on City of Gainesville property and permits and stuff? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, there's been no direction. The item that's on.
I don't think so, sir.
Is it on? Yeah. Is that better? There's been no direction given to me yet. There is an item that I think is on the next agenda, if it's still on the agenda, that is seeking from I think it's the Public Works Department, to have the commission direct our office to draft amended ordinances for their consideration. That amended ordinance would, there's currently, I think in chapter 23 of the city's ordinances, an exemption from GRU, the city's utility systems, from needing to get permits to do work in the right-of-way dedicated to the city, and exemption from any sort of fees that to be in that right-of-way. And it makes sense because it's the city's utility. So that will be considered, that request by the Public Works Department will be considered by the City Commission to direct us to draft the ordinance that they would then consider. Again, we're not involved in the formation of any such policy. And that's something I've said to y'all as well. We don't make policy. We carry out the directions of our governing boards now.
But you potentially are going to be creating an ordinance which could have a negative impact on GRU?
Be drafting an ordinance, could potentially, if directed, draft an ordinance, whether it's created, we can split hairs, draft an ordinance that would remove an exemption. That being said, I think that we're all going to have to go a long way to figure out how such an ordinance could be enforced.
I mean, the point that I'm trying to make is that you continue every time we have a conversation to say that you can be our attorney, but yet your boss tomorrow is instructing you to create an ordinance that is a negative impact on us and is a politicized piece, and you're gonna do as you're instructed, and you feel that you can be our attorney as well.
And I think what that comes down to, and I'm not going to belabor the point, we went into it in detail before, as to what this role is. And we have a disagreement.
I got that part.
And right, so I'm not going to go into it again, but yes.
Okay, but fair enough. We, as a board, have the ability to actually agree and vote on our own procurement process. The law states that. So what we've been fed or told is that we have to go through the RFP process. So I understand, and I'd like to ask Mr. Walker if in fact we have the ability as a board to say, hey, we're just gonna appoint an attorney. Mr. Walker?
You and I have had this discussion. I mean, I don't think
I
it's.
want everyone to hear it though.
Well, they were going to, but go ahead. Sure.
I think you have the ability to appoint an interim attorney if you so choose. I believe you have the ability to appoint an interim counsel. I think that you should establish your own procurement policies that are different from the policies that the city of Gainesville has. That's one of the things that needs to be done sooner than later, in my opinion. And yes, in answer to your question, I think you have the ability to seek counsel, seek consultants, and employ those that you feel are necessary to help this utility.
Thank you.
Certainly.
You good?
I just want to know if anyone wanted to make a motion.
Well,
to.
We're in member comment now. I'd like to finish member comment before a motion comes out because there might be more to it.
Fair enough.
Okay. So I have a couple of things here. One, just to address something about me meeting with the mayor or anything. That's very common for chairs of boards, mayors, everybody to meet in private to set agendas or come up with things. It's not illegal. It's not behind the scenes. Then we bring it forward. That's very common. I met with the University of Florida, the executives. I met with legislators. I met with the governor's office Monday. That's what I do. So I just want to assure you, I'm not back there doing deals or whatever, but it would be almost impossible for me to meet with everybody that I have to meet with as the chair to do it in public on TV. So I just want to assure you that everything I talk about eventually comes up to the public. It's just like the one-on-ones that they do also. That's very appropriate. So to Mr. Coates' point, we have been having discussions about independent counsel. This is no reflection on counsel anywhere. I personally, and quite frankly, I haven't ran into anybody at Publix or the Bagel Bakery that thinks that it's fair to you. They wonder what the hell you're doing. You should be forcing us to do this. So I want this board to make a motion to allow me as the chair to negotiate right now with Scott Walker this week as interim counsel to advise this board in all of our legal matters. He will tell us if we need to sit down with the city attorney and you know, if we're going to hire him, he's going to be the one. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. So I would like this board and to allow me to do this, not the GM or anybody else, the CEO, but me. Then I bring that back to the board. But that would be next meeting. I see your mic going on. Go ahead.
If I may.
You may.
Mr. Chair, and that's not necessarily anything that I've opined that you can't do. What I keep coming back to, though, and stressing to you, and I appreciate your concern and the concern of other people, because it is a difficult situation.
No, I wouldn't want it.
And what all that I would keep cautioning to do is to stay focused on the charter.
Yes, sir.
And the requirements of the charter for the role that I hold right now. And again, if you have consultants, you have advisors, that's all certainly within your authority.
Right.
I would continue to advise you that when it comes to the things specified in the charter, such as reviewing all contracts, bonds, and other instruments in writing, and endorsing approval as to form and legality, that is still, perhaps to your chagrin, the role that I hold. But that doesn't mean you can't receive counsel, advice from
Dan, and I got
external
that,
people.
Mr. Attorney, I got that. And again, that, no disrespect, but I haven't had the opportunity to sit down and really look our future, hopefully future counsel in the eye and say, what is your position? Because he might say, oh, he's full of crap. Let me show you this. I don't know. I'm not saying Scott would. But my request for a motion is going to be a couple of fold here. Okay, one, that you empower me to start that negotiation, that I bring it back to the next meeting. Two, that we reduce our payment immediately to I got to pay them. So, I don't want to pay double. I mean, our audience is saying, cut the budget, I don't want to add to the budget. So I don't know how that would be crafted. That's where it's a little shaky. That's where I'm going to have to sit down with the accountants. But I think by that next meeting, we need to have those answers. And I would like this board, someone in this board, to make a motion, and let's get that passed, that I can sit down and do that and bring a deal to this board.
Mr. Chair,
You can't make a motion.
I'm not making a motion. I'm concerned, I don't know the answer to this, that we do have procurement policies that require that to go through an RFP.
Let me, I'm gonna talk to that guy over there.
Okay.
And it's his license and his insurance that I think is gonna back up.
Yeah.
And if he says, hey, you gotta do this, but the point is, it's interim. So then, like I already had that conversation with him, I think that it would be smart to put a request for proposal out there, because there could be someone that makes him look like an amateur. I mean, no disrespect to anybody over there, but we have that duty, and it doesn't cost us, let's find out what's out there.
Yeah, so I agree. I just want to make the point, we may need the board to change our procurement policy in order to do that. And I just want to do the work to.
And that's no problem. My assumption is if that needs to be done, we'll have that language for next week.
Okay.
So that's why we need them. I mean, I don't know the answer to that. And for me to sit there and put him up on the end of this pen every time and then have him have to go look at his 7 bosses and go, hey, guess what? It's just not fair. I can't say it enough how much I trust this man. But I feel like I've put him in a very, very terrible situation.
And Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify. So I'm just trying to make sure we go through that process and we're following the rules and following the procedures. And if we need to change the procurement policy.
So again, I mean, no disrespect, but that's why I need to talk to him. And if he says, or that firm says, this is what we can do and it's wrong, we're going to look right back at them. Am I not correct? That's why we hire professionals. So I would love to entertain a motion in that fashion.
When you say next meeting, when are you talking
The
about?
14th.
Okay.
Yeah,
good,
no, I
good.
think time is of the essence.
Good.
Right now for a lot of reasons and for the employees.
Well, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Mr. Conish, you can smile.
Sir, this is not about like whether I'm happy.
No, so I shouldn't have said that.
This
I'm
is
sorry.
about the $3,000 to $5,000 I come here in person every month that I drag out of my tenants that are choking on the bills. It's not about me, like I'm off grid, so I don't really care what you do.
Well, I know you do because you care about citizens, but thank
But
you.
I care about the victims of this malaise. Let me read to you 3.03 city attorney in the charter that the city attorney never talks about and that was excoriated by Judge Dempsey due to his twisted interpretations. He shall be the legal advisor and attorney for the city. The city attorney shall serve at the will of the city commission. That disqualifies him because this authority must be free from the direction and control of the city commission. You can't have an attorney beholden to the city commission when there's adverse interests. Also, he does not serve when directed not to by the commission, which they're obligated under the charter to effectuate the transfer of control. So what they should do is pull them off, but they're not going to do it because they're out in no man's land. Now, if you go to 2, I want to read you Florida Bar Regulation 4.17, representing adverse interests. Except as provided in subsection B, a lawyer must not represent a client if the representation of a client will be directly adverse to another client, or if there's a substantial risk that the representation of one or more clients will be materially limited by the lawyer's responsibility to another client, a former client, or a third person, or by a personal interest of the lawyer. So he flunks on that. The item that Mr. Coates brought up tomorrow on the agenda is on the consent agenda. So the policy must be set because they're not even going to be discussed. And he's just going to ram it through. So he knows what's coming. And I have a series of scholarly articles that go into great detail as to why Article 7 of our charter prohibits the city attorney. This is the only charter officer that is flaunting HB 1645. You have your own clerk, you have your own everything, but NE is out of bounds completely. And Scott Walker knows this. Scott Walker worked with me to make sure we got a referendum on the Perry bill because the same group that are filing the private nuisance suits filed a suit against the city and the supervisor elections so that we wouldn't even have a vote on the Perry bill. NE's staff sat there, didn't defend the suit at all. Private citizens hired the dream team to make sure we got the vote. That's what we're dealing with Mr. Nee.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Any other speakers to the motion on the floor?
I really hesitate, Tom Canelio, I really hesitate to say anything about this. I don't know Mr. Walker, but my gut feeling tells me that this man here is put his reputation, put his experience, put his expertise on the line and see if he cannot take care of this problem. Because 2 attorneys, in my opinion, is way too many. This man could probably, if you asked him to, be the salve between 2 organizations, and you're brand new, and the city, which is old as the hills. Get one man to see before you spend the money to hire Mr. Walker. See if this man can do that job, because I think he can, from what I can tell, and I think you all listen to him.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Debbie Martinez.
Can you pull that down? Sorry. Thank you,
Debbie
ma'am.
Martinez. I support the motion as long as this gentleman doesn't have a record of working to shut down this board that citizens have been working for over 15 years. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have any other speakers to the motion on the floor? Seeing none, bringing it back to the board. All in favor of the motion on the floor? Aye. Aye. Okay, ayes have it. Okay, at this point, Madam,
Mr. Chair, there's nothing further other than adjournment.
and we are adjourned then. Thank you very much.